We'll get you kicking and right then into the
Okay,
21st century. There we go.
the mic is now on. And we are live streaming, so.
There you go. So, there. That's about 30 seconds. Good evening. The September 25th, 2025 Whatcom County Planning Commission meeting is called to order. Call the roll. Melvin Barton, that's me. I'm here. Fred Brown. Yep. Daniel Dunn. Yep. Anita Eisenberg. Anita Eisenberg. Oh,
She's here.
I see her on the screen.
You did.
We'll come back to her. Nicholas Gray.
Here.
Jim Hansen. Jim Hansen. Julie Jefferson.
Here.
Dominic Masseri.
Here.
Scott Van Dalen.
Here.
And Anita Eisenberg, I see you have your hand up.
I wasn't sure if you got my here. My internet cut out. Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Now we got Scott and I almost put Dominic, your name at the top up here, so I wouldn't forget to call you.
Oh, good.
Because I've done that more than once.
I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Please join me for the flag salute. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, I was trying to twist Matt's arm on department update, but we're actually not gonna have department update till planning director Personius gets back, so we will not have that tonight. And so it would be time for open session for public comment.
Welcome to the meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live. The audio is being recorded and will be posted to the county website. As noted on our website, members of the public may watch the meeting or join online or by phone. During the open public comment session, speakers may not speak to items that are scheduled on the agenda for a public hearing tonight. We have 5 public hearings for the city of Bellingham, UGA, Ferndale, Linden, Cherry Point, and rural resource lands. So at this time, you are not allowed to speak on those items. You will be given 3 minutes to speak. We will go with those in the room first and then the attendees online. So those in the room, please state your name. You're given 3 minutes.
My name is Ruth Danielson. At the September 11th meeting, we heard Mr. Amont respond to a question from one of the commissioners as to why, if the current UGA will accommodate the forecasted growth in the Birch Bay, is he proposing adding 2 urban area reserves? He responded it was not based on need. It was in the spirit of cooperation with the Birch Bay Community Advisory Committee. I'd like to respond to that. Mr. Amont may have assumed that the property owners out in Birch Bay had a chance to be a part of this specific UGA expansion request. They did not. At the March 27th Advisory Committee meeting, Mr. Amont gave an update of the current UGA plans. He stated the current UGA would accommodate the future 20-year growth and no changes were expected. At the very next Advisory Committee meeting on April 24th, one of the agenda items was Birch Bay Water and Sewer with Q&A. No topic, no specificity. According to the minutes, what they discussed was the possible urban growth expansion of their service area if the need existed. At the same meeting, the Advisory Committee voted to craft a letter in support of alternate 1, increasing the size of the current UGA. According to the Advisory Committee Rule 2.190.050F, any item intended for a vote must be clearly and unambiguously defined on the agenda. That was not done. In fact, the letter of support was mailed to the county on May 16th, prior to the minutes even being published. Whatcom County Planning Department made proposed UGA reserve additions that are not based on need, the environment, or analysis with more than one input. Their own analysis pointed out there is little employment or services in the Birch Bay UGA, so people drive long distances for such things. Does the addition of surplus reserve lands take into consideration HB 1181? Or the fact that 3 additional properties on Kickerville have conservation easements? The Birch Bay Advisory Committee's letter asked to increase the UGA to a much larger area, which growth management would not support. So Mr. Armand made the additions of 265 acres to the UGA reserve because he was being nice. Over 75% of the affected property owners asked that you reject the 2 UGA reserve proposals since they are not needed. The community did not get a chance to be involved in the Birch Bay Advisory Committee's recommendations, and the majority of the people in those designated areas do not want to be included. I brought to you a resolution with all of their signatures as evidence of that stated fact. This includes property on Arnie, Kickerville, and Bay. There's 29 total properties, 24 Whatcom County residents, 18 no's, 1 yes, and 5 people went home. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I get up to speak, can I just ask you to clarify, can we talk about the South View Street UGA right now or not? Or is that not allowed at this meeting?
That's part of Bellingham.
So that's what I was asking, you don't know?
It is part of the meeting. It'll wait till that part of the agenda.
Oh, tonight? Okay.
Yeah, it is tonight.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Yes, I got it. I sent it to him. Anyone else in the room wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to move to the attendees online. Would anyone attending online wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, Chair?
All right, time now for commissioner comment. Any commissioner comment?
I just apologize for answering the question. I should have let you answer the question. I'm a member of the public.
Sorry.
Went into default former chair mode. I'm
Too
just
many
like-
emails, I can't keep track of all of them.
Okay, and Eileen, for the record, Commissioner Hanson is online.
Thank you.
And go ahead, Commissioner Hanson, I heard some of what you said.
That's a new one.
I'll take that as a no.
Yeah.
All right, and let's move on to approval of minutes from the September 11th, 2025 meeting. There's approval.
Second.
The additions or corrections? Okay, Eileen, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Brown,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Eisenberg,
Yes.
Bright,
Yes.
Hanson,
Having internet problems.
Jefferson,
Yes.
Mosseri,
Yes.
Van Dalen,
Abstain.
Barton.
Yeah.
Passes.
It's all working out right. Thanks so much. Good job.
Commissioner Hanson, you have voice now?
Yes, I do. I even hear you.
Oh, very good. And so we just had a roll call and we weren't able to, it was for approval of the minutes. How do you vote on that?
I think I'll abstain since I didn't hear anything about it, though I'm sure it's correct.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hanson. All right, so the meeting topic is public hearing and work session regarding, and I'm gonna turn it over to the senior planner, Matt Ahmet, and go ahead.
All right, well, good evening, Commission. So last time on September 11th, we had 5 urban growth area proposals presented by the cities and the county. So tonight we have 4 more. We've got Bellingham, Ferndale, Linden, Cherry Point, and then we've also got the rural and resource lands. So Chris Behe was going to go first. He had a conflicting meeting, so he'll be here in a while. So we're going to start with Ferndale. So Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Matt. Gonna pop a PowerPoint up here real quick, hopefully. All right. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mike Serbone. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Ferndale. Thanks for having me here, Commissioners. I'm here to present Ferndale's UGA and UGA Reserve proposal. Here we have the existing urban growth area and urban growth area reserve. This is how it currently is within the within the county's comprehensive plan, the city's comprehensive plan. The graphic I just put up there is our existing comprehensive plan designation map. So it shows what we have within the existing city limits, and then it shows what we have planned for within our urban growth area and urban growth area reserves. I wanted to highlight for you that we have an awful lot of yellow area up in here. This is our low density residential zone. We also have an awful lot of yellow here, which is existing city limits that's already developed and built out with a lot of low density residential. As you're probably aware by now, House Bill 1220 requires us to correct that. We need to provide for housing that meets our community's needs, and we need to integrate that housing within the community. So the focus of what I'll be talking to you this evening about our UGA and how our UGA helps us achieve those goals. We're going to focus a lot in this area and in some of these larger areas that have not been developed that are currently in the city. And we'll also talk about some employment areas, specifically up around Grandview. Okay, so our proposal. We proposed through the multi-jurisdictional resolution 10,961 people to be accommodated over the planning horizon. We analyzed our UGA and we were able to accommodate 10,961 people plus some, and I'll get into that in a little bit. We looked at 4,659 new homes to accommodate those people. We're able to accommodate those 4,659 new homes. For growth of our population and employment, 3,337 new jobs. We're close on that. Not a very large margin of error there, but we are able to accommodate that. So where is this going? Population. A fair amount of our population, you see the biggest arrow here is going up into that UGA area. We're looking at doing some zone changes up there to accommodate the requirements of House Bill 1220 and transfer some of that low density residential housing to medium and high density residential housing. We're also still have some capacity along our Portal Way corridor. We have some mixed use areas and high density residential areas that are not developed or underdeveloped that can provide some capacity. We have some existing areas within the city that can also provide some additional capacity. And we have a pretty significant area over here. We've got a developer that picked up about 110 acres of mixed use zoning that again will provide for a fair amount of housing. And we have some existing zoning down south by where the county is proposing the new jail site. We do have some existing residential zoning down there that has not been built out. So for employment, I think a fair amount of that, we're looking at the future up here at Grandview. That has the ability, once we extend sewer service to it, to be able to accommodate a fair amount of job growth. Folks heard from Tyler from the port, who identified that as a pretty significant area for the region moving forward in terms of employment area. Again, we have Portal Way. We have a fair amount of commercial zoning, as well as some mixed use zoning there where we expect to see some job growth. We also have some other areas as well where we expect to see some in the existing city. Again, we have mixed use areas and we have some employment, light industrial manufacturing areas in this area that are underdeveloped or ready for development. And then we have some properties down south as well, a mix of mixed use commercial. We have some light industrial and other commercial zones down there. And then the Lummi also own a fair amount of property down there as well that they've been developing in a commercial manner. So this is where we expect to see a fair amount of housing over the next 20 years. Like I said before, we've got this UGA area here that is primed for development and annexation. We have services right at the edge of the city limits, and those areas can be developed. We have approximately 110 acres that was annexed in a little over a year ago that is yet to start the development process, but we expect to see that accommodate some future development. We have another 40-acre area here that is in the process of annexation. And then we have an area down here that is in the UGA that is low-density residential that we're proposing to upzone that to provide for missing middle and multifamily housing. Again, we have that mixed-use area over here I described. This is that residential area I described. And again, there's a fair amount of capacity along the Portal Way corridor. So like I said, some of these areas are in the city, have sewer and water available. Some will need the extension of water and sewer and annexation, and the city believes that we're capable of doing those. Okay, so our proposed UGA and urban growth area reserve, we're not proposing to expand the urban growth area. We have sufficient land within the urban growth area to accommodate our 20-year needs. We are proposing to identify new urban growth area reserve areas, and I'll talk about those a little bit towards the end of the presentation. But we are proposing two specific areas. One over here, again, to kind of build on what the port had identified as this being a significant area for the region. We think there's a potential for that moving forward. And then over here would be to more accommodate residential and commercial growth in the future. So what you see before you is the effective floodway and the effective flood zone for the city. So this is what we currently regulate development based upon. This is the FEMA map that is currently adopted and applied in our jurisdiction. And right next to it is you see the new map that we are anticipating having available to us at some point towards the end of this year or beginning of next year, based on information we've received from FEMA. I don't know how much to rely upon that information, but that is what we've received. For Ferndale, we don't see a lot of changes. You have to really kind of look closely. The new map shows a larger floodplain area here within the existing city. But for the most part, and then the floodway gets a little bit larger here, but for the most part, there's not drastic changes between the existing and proposed floodplain and floodway maps. It's important to note that none of the urban growth area reserves that we're proposing are within the floodplain or the floodway. And none of our existing urban growth area reserve areas are within the floodplain or floodway either, both the existing or proposed. Okay, so we've got 10,961 people is what we're trying to accommodate based on looking at the existing UGA and existing city limits and some proposed rezones. We believe we can easily accommodate 11,261 people. So that's a surplus of 300 over the allocation that we've discussed. And this is how we're meeting 1220. So the income band requirements, we didn't try and balance it. So we've got just enough 0 to 80. We tried to balance it in a reasonable manner. So we have a surplus of approximately about 250 for each of the three income band areas. So that would be 242 additional units in the 0 to 80 AMI, 251 units in the 80 to 120, and 250 units in the 120 plus. So this is where I alluded to earlier, the employment projections are, they're right there, right? So we've got a surplus of 22 jobs. Certainly there's some sort of factor of error there, but the nice thing about this process is we're identifying our 20-year needs. We're going to come back in 10 years and remeasure that and make decisions. So we're pretty comfortable with what we're proposing. We do have plans to extend sewer up to Grandview, which should unlock a fair amount of the future employment areas for us. And we do have existing underdeveloped employment areas too that are likely to develop in the near term. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the rural study areas and agriculture. And I'm going to call it capital A agriculture, right? So agricultural land that is specifically designated within the county's urban growth boundary or comprehensive plan as resource land, So that area is shown in this kind of mint green here, right? So I've got this area here. So this is area that's been identified in the county's comprehensive plan as long-term commercial agricultural land. This is land that's designated and probably, should be fairly difficult to undesignate, as we're seeing in some of the comments that we received in the record for Sumas and some of the other areas upriver. So the city of Ferndale right now doesn't have any of that in the areas that we're proposing our new UGA areas. And again, those new UGA reserve areas are 7 here and 6 over here. Now, I'm an Oregon State Beavers fan. I love the color orange. That's what you see on the screen here. That orange is a resource study area. So this is part of a project where the county is going through and trying to identify future lands that could be included in the comprehensive plan as capital A designated resource agricultural land. The city of Ferndale is a little concerned about that. We're concerned about that for several reasons. First, I want to state that we are very supportive of farmland and forest land preservation. We believe that that's part of our local economy. We believe that's part of the future of our local economy, and it is important to preserve farmland and forest land. What we want to make sure happens is that that land is designated in an appropriate place. There's thought put into where it's designated, and it's not considered to be undesignated at some point in the future. So if you're looking to designate agricultural land where a UGA can't expand, and it's right next to our UGA, that's going to create some problems for growth. Maybe not in 20 years, maybe not in 30 years, maybe not even 40 years, but at some point down the road, that's going to create a problem. And I think with the county's goal of trying to preserve agricultural land moving forward, there should be some thought into exactly where that's placed. There should be an understanding that we have existing communities that are going to need to grow over time. And we really just don't want to be boxed in like some of the other communities have been in the county. So these areas here are study areas. The county is working to finalize this plan, I understand. And one of the things we're talking about are urban growth area reserves tonight, right? So one of the things not mandated by the GMA is using urban growth area reserves for planning. Now, I'm going to tell you, I think using urban growth area reserves for planning makes a lot of sense from a lot of different reasons. For one reason, I think it allows small districts that also provide services within our communities the ability to look out further and identify areas where they might be able to accommodate their future needs. So those districts are like the school district and the fire district. It allows them to look at areas that they may need in 20, 25 years and rely upon the fact that that probably is going to come into the UGA at some point in the future. I also think it helps by telling property owners, hey, this is like an area that's eventually going to come in and be urbanized. So if somebody's looking to purchase a property or sell a property, they can understand what the long-term complications they may deal with or the long-term intended use of the property is. So I think they're very important. I think it allows us to do long-range planning in a more thoughtful and complete way. But I'm going to tell you that the GMA doesn't require us to do it right now. I'm also going to tell you that we have a lot of stuff that poor Matt needs to herd the rest of our cats and get us through between now and the end of probably the first quarter is what I'm guessing of next year. And so I think we can take this decision about how and where the UGA reserves go, and we can punt it. We can put that as a comprehensive plan policy that obligates the county to work with cities to do that work. And part of the reason why I think it's important to do that is it gives us more space to get the work done that we need to do. And it gives us more space to more thoughtfully consider about where these UGA reserves are going to be and engage all of the stakeholders in that conversation. We have people participating in this review right now, organizations that are very uncomfortable with this concept of urban growth area reserves. I think it's appropriate to step back, take some time, engage them, engage the agricultural community, especially for Ferndale, and be able to have that thoughtful conversation without kind of pushing things through. Now, if you don't listen to me, which is totally, your prerogative, and you want to go ahead and establish UGA reserves for the city of Ferndale, I've identified Area 6 and Area 7 as what we would like to do. But again, my recommendation would be that we pull that off the table and we talk about that in 2026 and 2027, and we focus on the work at hand that we need to get accomplished within the next few months. That's it. I can answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, can you go back to, there's two slides where you showed what the actual or assumed capacity for both the population, that one, and then the following one that showed the band.
This one.
It seems like, yeah, it seems like you have a higher surplus in housing than you have a surplus in population capacity.
Yep.
How does that work? If you had a higher surplus in housing, wouldn't that increase the surplus in population capacity?
I would imagine that your assumption is correct, but I'm going off the HAPTI model, which is what it identifies. And there's a lot of different things in the housing and planning tool for all model that can skew some of these things. Part of it has to do with the type of housing that we have, the inputs, like what exists currently within the community, and then what we have to add to it. Part of it also has to do with how the model calculates the needs for the overall region based on housing size. I couldn't begin to explain all of the background to you. All I can tell you is that I took an output that came out of the Housing for All planning tool, which is a state mandated tool that we use. And I use that in my land capacity analysis to go through and guide me. And these are the numbers that I came up with. I am fairly confident that we do have a surplus within the UGA. I'm also fairly confident that I could create more of a surplus with upzoning additional lands. As to an explanation for the delta between what was allocated to me and what was shown in the land capacity analysis and the HAPTI, I couldn't provide a very thorough answer on that beyond what I just gave you.
Yeah, can I kick in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually the City County Planner Group is going to discuss this. The HAPT is a state developed spreadsheet, which, as I understand it, uses a single household size throughout the county, which may not actually be, and it uses a consistent vacancy rate, again, which may vary from community to community. And also, the HAP tool looks at additional housing for people experiencing homelessness or people who are cost burdened. So there's a number of factors, and we're again going to discuss this because it's more pronounced in some communities than others at that City County Planner Group. But that's the way, the HAPT developed by the state and modified by our consultant, and we're supposed to use that for housing need. So we've done that. So.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Hanson.
I just want to be clear procedurally. Mr. Sabone, apparently on behalf of the city of Ferndale, is asking that we not at this point approve the UGARs as indicated on that map to the west of town. What position does that leave us in regard to processing this?
I can take a stab at that, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My request to you is that we don't need to do this right now, and it is something that can be deferred. And the way that you can provide assurance to the jurisdictions that are very interested in using the Urban Growth Area Reserve as a planning tool is by placing a policy or goal within the comprehensive plan that obligates the county to do that work in the future. As I pointed out, we don't need the UGA reserves to meet GMA requirements, nor do we need them to meet, House Bill 1220 or the other items. It is an advanced planning tool that could benefit our region, but it's not something that's mandated at this point in time. I would imagine, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you chose to recommend pushing that out or punting that to a later date and adding that goal or policy, that is something that then the council would consider and either act upon or not, and either add that policy or goal within the comprehensive plan or not. Matt?
Yeah, so that's correct, and these are not required. Urban growth area reserves are not required. They're normally zoned R10A, one dwelling per 10 acres to preserve land for future urban development. So Mike brought this up on Monday at a meeting we had, and we put it on the agenda for the city county planner meeting. tomorrow. So we're going to discuss it, as a group. So we'll see what the outcome of that is. If we want to have a kind of a uniform, we'll all pull the UGA reserves and put it in a policy for 26, 27. If there's not consensus, then, Ferndale or other jurisdiction could say, hey, we just want to pull ours, contingent upon putting a policy in the comp plan that we would reserve, or we would address this in the next year or two.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if the county is going to go forward with them, I'm proposing areas 6 and 7 for the city of Ferndale. But we certainly would be comfortable with putting it on pause and having more detailed discussion to, again, bring in all of the different stakeholders who may be impacted by it.
So pardon me to be talky here, but if Ferndale is not proposing those expansions at that time, this time, who is?
You mean for the UGA reserves?
Yeah.
There's other
Who is?
jurisdictions that have those UGA reserves as part
No, I
of
mean for Ferndale on this map that we're supposed to make decisions about. If you're not proposing it, who is?
This is what our proposed UGA and UGA reserve is.
Right.
So we do have these two areas on here. So that's there. And I recommended that if you do not want to move forward with those right now, that would be fine with us. And
Well,
provide
do
rationale as
you
to-
have standing to withdraw them
Do I have standing to withdraw them?
on the behalf of the city of Ferndale? I'm trying to figure out who is the county proposing this, or is the city of Ferndale proposing these, regardless of the merits? It's confusing to me.
Yeah, no, this whole process is confusing. I can appreciate that, Commissioner Hanson. So the way the process, as I understand it, is we, the city, propose our UGA and UGA reserves. The county is in the seat to be able to make that final decision about how and where those UGA and UGA reserves are. So the city is proposing to include areas 6 and 7 as reserves, as new reserve areas. We wouldn't be upset if you pause that so that it could be a better conversation in the future. And we're acknowledging and making clear to you that it's not required for us to be done as part of this process.
And so I think, we have our meeting of the city county planners tomorrow. If there's consensus that everybody wants to withdraw their UGA reserves, then I imagine, we'd write some type of a memo, to the commission on that. If there's not consensus about doing that, then individual jurisdictions could decide, okay, I want to withdraw mine anyway till 26, 27, that type of thing.
Commissioner Brown and then Commissioner Gregg.
Michael, could you go back to the slide, which had the orange on it? Yeah, that one. So I would actually like to encourage you to keep the UGA reserves, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Is when you look at this map, the least impactful direction for Ferndale to expand appears to be to the west. Anyway, you can't really go to the east because of the flood zone for the most of it, although there's some in the southeast. But the other side of it is there's all these conflicting objectives in terms of protecting land, and one of them is people are saying, well, we don't want you expanding into areas of potential agriculture, but at the same time, we want you to limit vehicle miles traveled.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't expand the UGAs close to the city limits, you're just increasing the amount of miles that people are going to have to travel, because you're going to end up with this sort of checkerboard of UGA and non-UGA areas. The other side of it is that there's a lot of talk about, we need to have more agricultural land. Most of the land west of the freeway has no water. So that's the reason it's been limited to cattle grazing as opposed to berries or, for the most part, potatoes, because there's no agricultural water supply there. So I think your actual plan is the right one, and I would encourage you to continue supporting it.
Thank you, Commissioner. We think it's the right one too. The primary reason why we're not proposing or suggesting that it could be deferred to a later date is just to allow for more time to have that conversation. I believe there's a fair amount of agreement between the city of Ferndale, FutureWise, Whatcom Environmental Council, in relation to how land outside of an urban growth area is managed. And I think it's appropriate to sit down and have that conversation and talk with those entities and talk with the agricultural community, and include, different people in that discussion. My big concern is that, we don't want to try and like push things through quickly. If we have space and time to have this conversation, we should make the space and time to have the conversation and focus our time and energy on the things that we need to get accomplished in the short term. But thank you. I appreciate that. And I do, my concern when I look at the city of Ferndale right now is not our 20-year land supply. I'm not really concerned about our 40-year for that much either. But I do want to make sure that the community can continue to grow over time, because as we grow, we're either going to grow in our compact urban growth areas, or we're going to see, suburban development permeate the county. And I think preserving farm and forest land, we need to promote that compact urban development with inside the UGAs.
I just want to add one last thing. When you get the pushback on, well, we've got to preserve the farmland, again, one of the issues is where's the water coming from? The other one is, and I noticed in one of the documents provided to us, is that land is defined as prime farmland if drained. Well, that requires that you put in drain tile, which is a violation of federal law. So that land cannot be converted into prime farmland because you're not allowed to increase the drainage because you're draining the wetlands. So again, it's a bit of a red herring when people keep putting that argument forward.
Commissioner Bright.
Process question and other questions. Are we doing questions now, then public hearing, then action, or should we be doing public hearing on this?
It's a good question, and it's okay to ask some questions on this, but we'll get into more discussion and motions and things like that. But for clarification, and we have been presented a map and then presented a verbal alternative that they really want, and then we're trying to sort that out.
Cool. Okay, and my questions ahead of a public hearing would be ahead of any motions I make, would be, Michael, you were saying that if you go to your zoning map, I think it indicated that that top, kind of less dense yellow, yeah, you just right to it, area was where you thought a lot of the actual like infill development could go. Is that, are you changing the zoning for that area?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The existing zoning under that comp plan designation, you're seeing that light yellow, that could only come in as our RS low or RS medium. So that would be between 3 and 7 dwelling units per acre, primarily single family detached, with some ADUs. We'd be proposing, what we're trying to create is, a complete community up there, similar to what Bellingham has done in Barkley, but probably not to the extent or scale that Bellingham is. We know we need a new commercial center. We need to plan for new grocery areas. That's, there's a commercial area component in there. I can show you a different slide after the public hearing if you want, that details the work that Western Washington did. That kind of shows how they've designed a complete community up there. But the goal would be to have high density residential housing up there. So that would be 15 to infinity dwelling units per acre. Some medium density multifamily residential. So that would be 10 to 30 dwelling units per acre. Some RS high. So that would be 7 to 9 dwelling units per acre. Some mixed use commercial. And then, like I said, some actual dedicated commercial land for potential for like a grocery store and some other services intended to reach beyond the neighborhood. And then we're also going to be proposing some specific neighborhood commercial areas, like right adjacent to the existing residential neighborhoods, because the UGA will take a long time to build out. But we can get some of those neighborhood commercial services in immediately, right on the periphery of the existing city limits. So yeah, no, that's the plan. And then in all these other areas that I've circled here that are yellow, that would be the plan, is to upzone them. These areas are already upzoned, have a fair amount of density allowed, right? We have our mixed use zone that has unlimited residential density. That's what this is as well. And this is already, you know, a combination of mixed use and medium density residential multifamily. So the rezoning activities would occur in here, and then actually a few in the city as well. And then a significant amount up here for employment uses, because right now this pink is all commercial designated land. And while we still need some commercial designation up there, what you heard from Tyler from the port is we also need areas for manufacturing and light industrial as well. So we'd be looking at rezoning that regional retail, which was kind of like the Costco come to Ferndale zoning, and designate that into light industrial and manufacturing.
Thank you, that's super helpful. And I guess just a general comment to you and all the other cities, I think as part of these presentations, of before and after zoning map would be super helpful to understand, like, here's what the current zoning is, here's what we're proposing or have recently changed. It's gonna help us meet our housing and population requirements, because it's like such a visual visual aid for sure. Sorry, but the way you're approaching this, I really appreciate it. I think it's really thoughtful.
Thank you.
And Michael, we've had requests, a couple of commissioners are asking if you can forward the PowerPoint to Eileen, Planning Commission Coordinator.
Of course, yeah, I can do that when I'm done.
Okay, and then Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, Michael, can you go back to the one that has the orange mapping on it?
Sorry for the whiplash.
So tell me if I'm incorrect. The zoning in 7 and 6, if it gets put in the UGA, would be R10A. Is that true? It would change the zoning in that area?
So yeah, my understanding, the way Matt described it, is the UGA reserves have kind of that 10-acre minimum. It's kind of a holding zone. Right now they are, I believe it is minimum 5 acres per dwelling unit, but they can go higher if they have water and sewer. Is that
So
right?
it's something to consider in this conversation, that it doesn't just put them as a placeholder, it does change the actual zoning in those areas, if they are included or not.
Yeah, and I've been pretty clear in some of the other meetings where I presented, really, we want to protect large tracts of land, right? We want to make it easy to annex land, and we want to make sure that we're limiting what improvements occur on those lands before they're annexed in. Agricultural uses are great, but like I explained when you were meeting with the county council, if I've got a 10-acre parcel that has $1 million house, and I've got a 10-acre parcel that's broken up into 5, and there's $5 million houses. If I've got to annex in one of those, I'm going to want to annex in the one with the $1 million house, because I can generally work around that. Developers can incorporate that into the pro forma and strike it if it's for industrial land. But if I've got $5 million worth of houses, I need to then incorporate that into the cost of redeveloping it if it's industrial, or I have to work around it a lot more, and it makes it harder to get urbanized densities. And then just having property broken up into smaller pieces changes the property owner's view on whether they would like to be annexed in or not. And we had that situation where we annexed in up here 110 acres. They were all over 5 acres in size. No issues there. We had everybody more than willing to become part of it. We have a smaller annexation down here, which has several 2-acre parcels. The folks on those 2-acre parcels do not see any benefit to them annexing to the city, and want nothing to do with that annexation. And again, the number of property owners in this 40-acre exceeded the 110 acres up here. It exacerbates and makes annexation difficult.
Commissioner Dunn, and I think I'm in order here.
Michael, when you're looking at density, you upzone something, obviously it's not gonna happen overnight. In a 20-year period, how much density are you assuming that you'll get? Like, will every single homeowner maximize density in every single place? And if not, sort of what's your rough math for determining, like, hey, in 20 years, we assume that, about half these homeowners will achieve the maximum density, or a quarter of them will, or something like that?
So I mean, that's a great question, Commissioner, and it's a really hard one to answer, right? Like we are crystal balling here. We are doing our best to project, what the growth level is going to be and how and where that can be accommodated. There's a lot of tools jurisdictions have to, move development along. I don't see, the city of Ferndale doing a lot of that, trying to push things. As I answered, Councilor Ellenboss, he identified like, we have some dairy farms in our UGA and city, and that might, frustrate us. It doesn't frustrate us. They're part of the economy and they should be able to do what they want to do on their property moving forward. And, we're not likely to pressure them. That may change with councils in the future, but the way Ferndale looks at things is we want to make sure we have enough land. We want to have flexibility annex in different areas. And we want to be able to assist people in annexing and providing services so they can provide urban level densities. I think we've got a fair amount of land in the city, Commissioner, that can be developed right now with services. And I think we have areas that can be annexed in close proximity as well. The biggest lift for us moving forward to incentivize development is really the extension of our sewer line up to Grandview. And that is something that we're actively working on and have been for quite some time now, trying to put that in place. And we're confident that we'll be able to get that put in place. Now, all that being said, we have minimum densities in our residential zones. Not all of them, but most of our residential zones have minimum densities. So that doesn't allow for people to incrementally add density unless they're meeting the minimum density. So if I've got a property that's 5 acres that has a single family home on it, and they're like, hey, we just want to put 2 more single family homes, we don't let them do that. They need to actually meet the minimum density for that site to redevelop. Now, the ADU law, the way that the state passed it, would allow people to add density in that form incrementally. So they could add 2 additional ADUs per single family home. But we do have minimum densities in place, and that's how we assure that we're getting, consistent growth that is meeting the targets. Did I answer your question?
Close in a roundabout way.
Okay.
Jim?
Yeah.
Just quickly, I'd like to commend you and the city of Ferndale for all the good work you've done to provide utilities to the urban growth area and plan for growth and densify. And I think you're a good example to the rest of the jurisdictions in the county.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brown?
Michael, how much of your forecast capacity is based on the assumption of ADUs or people developing, say, they've got 2 parcels and you're assuming they're going to develop the second one. So they're 2 separate questions, but maybe you could address that.
Yeah, so the guidance we got from the state on ADUs was that we shouldn't be relying on them for, I believe, more than 5% of our needs. I think I identified 200 ADUs in my land capacity analysis for the UGA sizing, which is underneath that 5% number. I will tell you what I'm starting to see is that what the state has passed and mandated on the jurisdictions with regards to accommodating ADUs, it's starting to gel. We're starting to see developers come in and potentially pick up, a single family dwelling that's on, a larger lot that can accommodate 2 additional ADUs, and they'll buy it. And then they're proposing to add those 2 ADUs. We're also seeing people look at whole-scale subdivision developments and proposing land divisions based on what that single family dwelling count could be, and then densifying that by adding on those ADUs as well. And I think we're going to continue to see that moving forward as well. I think for a lot of reasons. For one, it gives a property owner a way to monetize part of their property. It gives you a way to allow an aging family member to age in place. If you can't get your kid out of the basement, maybe you can get them into a small ADU in the backyard. But I see that as being a change in what we've seen. Ferndale, as a joke kind of, but also to highlight that we support ADUs, in affordable housing, we said, hey, we've got, free t-shirts. The first 10 people to build an ADU in Ferndale will get one of these t-shirts, right? We didn't actually think that that was going to incentivize people to build ADUs, but what we wanted to do was signal, like, we see this as an important, development type moving forward. And I believe when Chris comes on later, you could ask him from the city of Bellingham, but I think they've seen a fairly significant uptick in the amount of ADUs that they're permitting. We've certainly seen a lot more within, the last year than the first couple of years that we had. And I think they're going to play a larger role moving forward. So all that to be said, I think, what we're identifying, we're probably going to exceed in terms of that LCA. I think there's likely to be more ADUs constructed.
So I just want to urge a bit of caution. I did a bit of research today on other jurisdictions. Portland has less than 2% ADUs. Seattle has less than 2%. Olympia has less than 1%. The only area, California as a whole, has less than 1%. Really only San Fernando, and I think around San Francisco, gets close to 10%. But they're still under 10%. So the ADU uptick is far less than I think most people are predicting. So I just urge it as caution.
Yeah, I mean, Southern California, where you identified, that's where they have the most ADUs. And the reason why is because they put a program in place to legalize all the illegal ADUs that currently existed. So, I mean, that's the other thing is, there are a lot of accessory dwelling units or portions of homes that, function as an ADU, although potentially not legally permitted in such a manner, that are providing housing to folks. And I'm sure there's plenty of those in our region as well.
Commissioner Greg.
Yeah, I was just gonna add onto that comment about ADUs. The other thing is that even in the markets they're building quite a few, almost none of them hit the public market. But almost none of them are rentable by the general public, which isn't necessarily their entire purpose, but as we think about creating housing that people have access to, like that's not what ADUs are either for, or certainly not what they're being used for. They do have value, no doubt about it, but we shouldn't be counting on them for housing stock that's available to people.
Well, the state won't let us count on them beyond 5%. So
yeah, I think that's wise, and it would have been wise if they said 2 or 1, but I'll take 5.
Okay. Matt, are we done with this one?
Public hearing.
Yeah, we need a public hearing, so.
Like we did last time where we had it all at the end.
I thought we did it after each one.
We did after each one.
Did we?
Yes, we do, we go in public hearing, and then
Oh, thank
The
you.
work session was at the end
Okay,
for everything.
okay, then let's open the public hearing. Eileen, we take over.
Yes. As a reminder, the meeting is being broadcasted live and will be posted to our website. The public hearing for tonight, or for right now, is City of Ferndale. You will be given 3 minutes to speak. I will start with those in the room and then go to the attendees online. Would anyone in the room wish to speak on the City of Ferndale?
Just regarding that presentation, I had a question. If that's acceptable.
If it's a public comment, yes.
I'll try to frame it as a comment. I guess one of the things that I heard the presenter talk about was developers buying a single family home lot and adding 2 ADUs. And I guess one thing I don't know and I'm curious about is whether there's any kind of restriction on the number of lots that can be bought by developers and have that done, given what we know about hedge funds controlling with algorithms, et cetera, rental prices and home prices. And I'm just curious if we have limitations on the books about that or not. So I can leave that as a comment rather than an actual question, but maybe that can be a discussion in the future.
Thank you. And what is your name for the record?
Maya Morales.
Anyone else wish to speak at this time on City of Ferndale? Seeing no one in the room, Chair will move to those online. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing no attendees wishing to speak at this time, Chair.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Dave Timmer or Linda.
So Heidi Goody is here. I think, Heidi, you're gonna think, yeah, there you go.
I am. Thank you. My name is Heidi Goody. I'm the Director of Community Development here at the City of Linden. I've worked closely with Dave Timmer, so perhaps you've seen a presentation from him or talked with him. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can. So to run through our UGA proposal, I will do so relatively quickly because I think it's pretty simple this time around. I know there's others that are more complicated. I wanted to talk a little bit about Linden and where we are and the tools we're implementing for growth. Although Linden holds 7% of the population, most recently it's taken 12% of countywide growth in the last 10 years. This to us has equated nearly 3,300 people since 2013. So we've definitely been growing and pushing the edges, as well as seeing some creative infill. And our current population has reached approximately 16,680. So we've stayed nearly equal. We've been neck and neck with Ferndale over the last few years. We don't anticipate that that will stay the same, however. Our past growth rate has been an average of 2.5% annually, but projections right now are looking at a 1.5% rate. The City Council has adopted a medium growth rate for our projection. The reasons behind that have to do primarily with the complexity of land development in the areas that we have remaining to go toward residential growth. The population allocation, as I mentioned, that equates our medium growth rate would equate to 6,665 people over the next 20 years. We did a look at the analysis and the capacity under current capacity with our existing UGA. We've got a capacity for a little over 7,000. And so that leaves us with a surplus of 417. However, when we look at income bands, as many cities are finding, the band bracket of 0 to 80 area median income had a deficit. So some of the tools that we had reached for as far as increasing housing density in certain area led us to look at our mixed use code, which we had recently updated, and increasing the density that's possible there. Our mixed use code targets 6 specific areas within the city. So it allows high density housing within a quarter mile of these 6 commercial areas. So this kind of gives you a picture of where they are. The north-south corridor is the Guide Meridian. This one cutting into the city is Front Street. And then, of course, Badger Road is at the northern edge of the city. We've got existing commercial centers, sometimes with empty spaces or surrounding commercial property that's underdeveloped. And those now hold the potential of having a high-density housing that can be within walking distance. When we made that adjustment, we ended up with a small surplus of 98 units in the 0 to 80%. We do anticipate the need, and most cities are looking also at supportive housing, relying heavily on outside funding or organizations within the city to provide those supporting housing needs. Other tools that the city has leaned on is adopting the state code on ADUs, so allowing 2 ADUs per single-family home. That's already been in place, and we are seeing, as Michael mentioned, we're seeing developers looking for opportunities there. We've created some housing or some codes related to middle housing. What we call them is residential mixed density, so that allows duplexes to be created within single-family neighborhoods, and it also allows for a wide range of lot sizes, anything from 5,000 square foot lots to larger. So they aren't restricted to the large, 8 to 10,000 square foot lots like you had seen in some of our traditional neighborhoods. We also created minimum densities in one specific area of the city, which is expected to hold most of our residential growth. That's in the Pepin Creek sub-area. For the first time, the city has adopted minimum densities there. And we also created a zoning code that's geared toward townhomes and allows the 3-story model of townhome development there. Looking at employment briefly, we do show a surplus of employment opportunities. We do, and if you've taken a look at the industrial study done by the port, we've got some available property on the west side of Linden that holds great opportunity and relatively shovel-ready when it comes to having utilities available. So the urban growth areas, as you can see in dark gray here in Linden, this is what we have remaining for our urban growth areas after a series of annexations in the last few years. We do anticipate that this will hold us over for the next 20 years. At this time, we're not proposing UGA reserves, but we are interested in looking at a 40-year look as far as what directions make the most sense to go. Obviously, looking at agricultural property moving forward is very relevant to Linden as well. And that's my whole presentation.
Any questions? Commissioner Dunn?
Can you walk us through the potable water situation there? I know there's been a lot of discussion with ecology and other users about Linden's ability to have water rights. Can you give us sort of the elevator speech of how that the whole scene is?
Sure. The City of Linden and Department of Ecology have a disagreement about the quantity of our water right. We are operating under a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Ecology, which allows us to continue to draw from the river. Our side of the obligation is that we continue to look for creative ways of adding to that water right that doesn't pull from the river. We've taken some initiative on some pretty creative projects, including a recharge aquifer, recharging the aquifer upstream of the river. And we got a sizable grant from the Department of Ecology and working very closely with them on that. And then we also introduced foreign water, which sounds suspicious, but it's actually the water that comes from distilling milk from Dairygold. So that is actually considered industrial waste or a discharge, even though it's distilled water. We were able to route that water, separate it from stormwater and route it to the river upstream of our intake and count that toward our water right. So opportunities like that continue. We expect the adjudication is really the final decision as far as what is the city's water right and settle that with the Department of Ecology. In the meantime, we do have a water use plan that gets reviewed by the county. That process will continue as we move forward.
Any other questions? Commissioner Brown?
What, do you have any what analysis of the impairment from wetlands for the areas that you're planning expansion?
I'm sorry, the analysis of what?
Areas planned for expansion that are impacted by wetlands.
We do struggle, or when it comes to development, it's a struggle with high groundwater. But we are developing areas that traditionally have been farmed, and farmers tend to be very efficient as far as creating drainage. So we are working with some highly modified sections of the city. And in this map, what we anticipate in these larger tracts is this would be zoned for residential as it comes into the city, and it will be. The county does have a mapped wetland on the west side of Double Ditch Road. That's part of the urban growth area that we have not annexed into the city, and we do anticipate that it would reduce the density. So we do have that calculated into our minimum densities, that there's an obligation to look at what's actually the net factor. Beyond that, we look at what is our biggest limiting factor at times is overland flooding. So we get flooding from water that comes out of Canada. It spills out of the Pepin basin and floods toward the center of the city. So those contribute a lot of challenges, much more at this point than wetlands.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, let's open the public hearing.
This is for the city of Linden. Do we have anyone in the room that wishes to speak on this topic? Seeing none, we'll move to those attending online. Do you wish to speak at this time on the city of Linden? Seeing no hands, Chair.
Okay. Close the public. On. We got two of them here, but we'll move on to Cherry Point.
Okay, so Chris Behe has joined us. Let's go with Bellingham, then we'll move to Cherry Point if we can.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening, commissioners. For some reason, my camera is not working, but I'm going to see if I can screen share and show you the slides. So.
Why are those?
Are you able to see those? See the slide?
Nope.
No.
Hey, Chris, if you want to email them to me, I can run it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hang on just a second. It's the same thing I emailed you before, Matt, if you still have that.
I'd have to find it.
That's all right. I'll just forward it right now to you, and then you
Yeah.
have it on the top of your inbox. Just bear with me just a second. Okay, that should be on its way, Matt.
All right.
For that.
Being slow, it's not come in yet.
Okay, yeah, it's
Chris, you remember what day you sent me the presentation previously?
it should be, let's see.
Is it still sending on your end or is it come?
No, it left about it left a little while ago, so it should be coming through.
There we go.
You get it? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Super. Yeah, I'll just prompt you to when to move it. Appreciate that.
Okay. Safe scan in progress.
No, I'm sorry. I sent it to you related to the countywide electeds meeting.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Should be unchanged other than the title page. So.
Yeah, your email came through.
Okay, good. All right.
Give me a moment here. Good.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, if you can just go to the next one.
Oh, I gotta bring that back up.
Okay, again, good evening, Commissioners. Chris Behe with City of Bellingham Planning and Community Development. Thanks for the opportunity to present tonight. This is Bellingham's UGA proposal, starting out with just a summary map showing the reconfigured urban growth area as it's proposed in the draft Bellingham plan, which coincidentally is before our Planning Commission this evening as well. Just kind of moving around the map, starting at the upper left corner between Bellingham and Ferndale. You can see there is a gray crosshatched area that's being proposed for removal from our urban growth area to be designated as a reserve area. It encompasses about 850 acres, as you can see noted there in red. It's zoned predominantly light impact industrial under the county zoning code. There is a corridor of general commercial zoning that parallels Interstate 5 just on the easterly side, basically connects the remaining urban growth area to the Ferndale urban growth area there. So that area is being proposed for removal. A couple of just quick reasons behind that. It's an area that's beyond the airport, which is unlikely to be annexed during the planning period. So we felt like it was disingenuous to include that. There's also limited development capacity in those areas. It's if you look at the wetland and stream map, there are salmon-bearing streams and a very large interconnected system of wetlands that relate to those streams. It's the headwaters of Bear Creek, Silver Creek, and some of those streams that dump into the Nooksack River. Lots of lakes and ponds. So for those reasons, and also just the separation between Bellingham and Ferndale as a potential habitat corridor, it's largely forested. We felt like it was an area that should be removed from the UGA at this time. We did propose to leave it in reserve status for future evaluation. That doesn't mean we'll bring it back in at some point. It just means it would be evaluated. As I said before, there are significant environmental features in that area. You can see there's an area at the north there that says add to the urban growth area. It's about 364 acres. Most of that area is the North Bellingham UGA Reserve, and then there's a small portion, about 6 tax parcels that lie southerly of Larson Road that are in the very kind of northeast corner of that rectangle. That's not currently in reserve. It's just in rural county zoning, but we're proposing to bring that in as well to complete the boundary and to provide access to Meridian along Larson Road for development contemplated in that area. I'll talk more about the kind of capacity estimates for that area in the future, but that's basically an area that we feel is necessary to make up about an 800 housing unit shortfall in our estimated land capacity in our existing city and UGA footprint. Also on the far right, you can see the Lake Whatcom watershed with a dashed blue boundary. And then there are 2 areas that red arrows point to there. And you can see it says remove from urban growth area. It's about 785 acres. That's the area that's north of the Silver Beach neighborhood and easterly of Britain Road. And then also the Geneva area south on the south shore of Lake Whatcom. Those are both areas that have basically developed out at fairly suburban densities. The county downzoned those areas as part of a watershed-wide downzone to rural 5-acre zoning for any remaining developable land in the area. There are no tracts in those areas that can be further subdivided based on that density. And so I think we had a total of maybe a couple of dozen homes that could be built in those 2 areas, and just felt like having that area in our growth area with really no significant development capacity, and also the fact that it does not align with Bellingham or Whatcom County's policy direction to protect the Lake Whatcom watershed because it's Bellingham's drinking water source. So for those reasons, we felt like it made sense to remove it from the urban growth area. And then at the south end, you can see we have an arrow pointing to the south part of the U Street corridor. That's the existing U Street urban growth area reserve area. We're proposing, following the analysis in the EIS, following our land capacity analysis and the work we've done to estimate infrastructure costs and comparing that to the area at the north, we're proposing to retain that in reserve status for consideration in a future planning cycle, but feel like It can't by itself meet our growth needs. The area at the north can, and Bellingham does not have the resources to contemplate activating both of those areas during the coming planning period. We're like everybody else, we're in a real budget crisis. We just don't feel like we have the necessary infrastructure capability to serve both of those areas successfully. So we've recommended bringing the north area in because we know that that area does have the capacity. One of the key features is it's relatively flat. The area at the South U Street Reserve area, has very steep terrain, about 500 feet of relief across it, which means if and when we do provide infrastructure down there, the cut, fill, and other things necessary for roadways would be very expensive. It also means that those areas would be less likely to have significant multimodal options. So your pedestrian and your bicycle traffic. Steep hills are very problematic for pedestrians and cyclists. And we feel like that north area we could really activate with transit, with pedestrian access and bicycle access in a mixed use environment. And we just don't feel like the terrain at the south end would support that kind of development. So a variety of reasons, but really the big deciding factor was that we just don't feel we have the resources to be successful in serving the area if we do the north area at the same time. So you can see a note on the slide there, an overall reduction given these reconfigurations of almost 1,300 acres in our total UGA. Okay, thanks, Matt. The next one. This is just a quick snapshot of the growth numbers, population, housing, and employment. The existing numbers for 2023, and the first column, the last column is the 2045 total. What I really want to focus your attention on is that center column, which is the growth component contemplated during this planning period. As the note there indicates, the totals in our growth proposal do align with the County Resolution 2025-11 adopted a number of months ago. 30,300 people. The commerce housing allocation based on that population estimate of 18,390 housing units. And then Bellingham's employment total, which kind of splits the difference between the consultants' medium and high projected employment totals, 19,384 jobs during the planning period. And and then this slide really just kind of plays to those numbers and provides some of the thinking that went into them. You can see from a population perspective, the line graph there in the upper right is our population growth and the projected growth from the 2016 comp plan. The blue line is the growth we projected. That's why it's a straight line. It was 1,350 people per year during the planning period. And then the orange line is really what we are actually able to accommodate. And you can see that with the exception of that dip during the pandemic years, which we then made up, we've been just above that line. We've accommodated, we've been averaging about 1,450 people here per year when we projected about 1,350. So about 100 more people per year in the Bellingham UGA than what was anticipated. This projected growth proposal of 30,310 works out to about 1,380 people per year, which we feel it aligns well with that growth. It's just slightly less than what we've been doing, but it's very much in alignment with that growth total that we've been able to accommodate. And then the housing, you can see down on the lower right there, the pie chart, that's housing that's been accommodated in the last planning cycle by Bellingham and the other jurisdictions. And you can see Bellingham's accommodated, I think it's 2016 to 2024, sorry, that 8-year period. Bellingham accommodated just over half of the countywide housing. We've averaged about just over 700 new homes per year. And the growth that we would project based on this UGA proposal is about 836 units per year. So it's a significant increase. But we do feel like it's a reasonable increase given the increases or the changes to Bellingham's zoning, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Can you go to the next slide, Matt? This is the employment total. We're projecting growth of around 880 jobs per year. You can see at the top there, the first sentence, the 2016 plan projected that Bellingham would grow by almost 1,200 jobs per year. And what we actually did was closer to 525. I would direct your attention to the line chart there, which is from Bureau of Labor and Statistics. It's a countywide Bellingham Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is the countywide growth total. Bellingham represents about 60%, just 58%, I think, actually, of that total. And you can see the growth total prior to the pandemic, we were actually exceeding the projected 1,187 jobs per year. We were averaging about 1,815 new jobs per year. And then you could see the big cliff there that all of us fell off of during the pandemic. And since then, we have recovered, but nowhere near previous levels. And it's been spotty. You can see a big dip there early this year. And so we feel like recommending something close to 880 is a realistic and achievable total, given the sort of uncertain economic times we find ourselves in. It's certainly a lot less than what we projected in the last plan, but we do feel like it's a reasonable number and a little bit higher than what we've averaged. We're just counting on not having another pandemic. With that, we can roll to the next slide. Real quick tour. There's a lot on this map, but this is our draft proposed land use map. Again, you can see those proposed boundary changes around the edges that match up with that previous slide. I want to just run through the map and the colors and what's happening. You can see with the bold pink outlines in the kind of central part of the map, those are the urban villages for Bellingham. And that is still absolutely a key component of our growth strategy. We've had that for the last 2 planning cycles, and they have performed. They've absorbed a little bit more than a third of all employment and housing for Bellingham during that time. To give you an idea, they've absorbed a third of our growth and represent 4% of our land area. So that's the kind of efficient, sustainable development that we're really aiming for to maximize our multimodal transportation and investment in utilities and urban services. So we're really relying on them to be one of the legs of the stool for our future growth. But we do understand that not everybody can live in that kind of mixed use, higher floor count kind of environment. People need different kinds of housing for different stages of life or different needs. So we are in alignment with the new state housing legislation, particularly House Bill 1110. We are reconfiguring all of the yellow on the map and the orange, which is our residential single and our residential multi-zones. And you can see the things that we're doing in those areas is we're, as per state regulations, we no longer have residential single zoning. We will have a middle housing zone that allows residential single development as well as the full spectrum of middle housing. So that's your duplex through sixplex, your townhomes, co-living housing inside of housing where it's individually rented rooms or SRO type of rentals. A whole variety of different housing types will be allowed. Also, we'll be implementing minimum densities across the city instead of the areas we have now that are residential multi have minimums, but our residential single zones that we have today do not have minimum densities. So we will be implementing minimum densities to ensure that we get the performance of our land that we are investing in. We are, again, in alignment with House Bill 1110, we are allowing up to 4 housing units outright on every lot, or up to 6 if 2 of those housing units are affordable, and that means affordable to 80% or less of median income. There's also a provision in state law if Bellingham does develop any multimodal transit facilities that do qualify under the state's rules. We currently don't have any. Then with development within a half a mile of those kinds of high-frequency transit stops would qualify as well. You can also see on the watershed side, in addition to removing those UGA areas, we're also, for the existing portions that are remaining within the watershed that are within the city, or the small portion of the UGA that is in the watershed that we're retaining, we're developing a purpose-built residential watershed zone. And this is in recognition that while everywhere else in the city, we're trying to maximize the usage of our footprint and get urban forms for housing and employment. In the watershed, that's not our approach. We are about preserving and protecting our water source. And so we will have, instead of relying on an overlay, that overlays zoning that does allow significant development, we are going to have a custom zone that just speaks to watershed protection and minimizes the amount of allowed development. That will be developed over the coming year as our code updates proceed. We also have a selection of new public zones that are being added. Those are those green areas. Most of those are existing, but there are some new ones reflecting recent purchases of city land within the last planning period for regional stormwater detention or for open space and parks. And also the two elementary school and options high school campuses for the Bellingham School District that were not previously zoned public. Most of theirs were, but there were 3 that were not. They were zoned residential and one of them was industrial. So those will be changed to public for consistency. There is also a bullet there that indicates the potential for Whatcom County rezoning the high impact industrial zones in the Alderwood area to light impact industrial. That has not happened yet, but Bellingham is supportive of that move. And then also, again, in the yellow and orange areas on the map, allowing small scale commercial uses in all residential zones. And those are getting at those essential services to minimize vehicle trips for residents in these areas that will be getting more middle housing, specifically things like daycare, medical services, potentially, coffee shops, small groceries, because food is one of those essential pieces. So those kinds of services, that's a development code we have yet to finalize, but the conversations around that have started at the city council level, and we'll be working with planning commission in the coming year to develop that code and bring it forward to council. Okay, that's a quick tour. Happy to answer questions later on that. This is our land capacity summary slide. I won't dwell on this in any great length, just to point out at the bottom there, capacity estimate for 18,890 housing units and about 21,000 new jobs. Looking at the different proposed zones that capacity is coming from, I'll highlight that residential low zone has we're estimating over 6,000 housing units. A good part of that is that new middle housing component. And then the other one would be the urban villages, about 5 or so lines down. You can see about 6,000 housing units there as well. And importantly, about 9,000 jobs. Again, just illustrating how important that 4% of our land area is to us. And we're really leveraging those investments in infrastructure with the zoning that we've allowed in those areas, allowing higher floor counts and more square footage in those areas. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is getting to our housing capacity by income. Again, this is our compliance piece with the legislature related to House Bill 1220, which is part of the RCWs in our growth management periodic update process. So going from left to right, you can see the different AMI income categories from 0 to 30%, all the way up to the greater than 120% of area median income. The gray bars are our existing housing in the community today. So that's a number of housing units in each of those income categories. The orange bars represent the projected need based on Commerce's projected housing need for our community in each income category. And then the blue bars are where we think our capacity is. Again, that's with these proposed land use changes and with, importantly, as it said it's in the title, with the existing resources. And I really mean financial and nonprofit organizational resources is what we're talking about there. Everything in the dashed line on the left, so the left sort of half of the diagram is the 0 to 80% area median income category. And you can see that we do exceed the capacity in that 50 to 80 category. And as the note says there, that's really because that's the market rate rental income range that most of Bellingham's multifamily housing falls in, just the natural rate. What we really need to do is figure out how to get some of that excess capacity in that category to trickle down into those 0 to 30 and 30 to 50 income categories. The only thing that really will do that is more money, and also nonprofit organizations to provide those permanent supportive services along with that. And if you flip to the next slide, and then jump past that to the next one. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. This is what really would happen if we had the resources we needed. We've got the with the proposed zoning changes and the boundary configuration changes, we've got the land supply, we've got the zoning that allows the housing forms to meet these categories of housing. But again, we don't have the financial resources. And that's where, if those were available and we had several more Colson community land trusts and more opportunity councils and Bellingham housing authorities and Mercy Housing and those, in the community. And if those organizations had more capacity and funding, we could then move some of that housing out of that 50 to 80 category into that 30 to 50 and 0 to 30, and in particular, the permanent supportive 0 to 30 category. Right now, we just don't have that capacity, and we're just trying to be as upfront and honest with the state about that as possible and with the community. We've done what we can as far as proposed zoning changes, and we will be tracking this very carefully. And we do have a variety of incentives, which I'll talk about in a few moments, but we think realistically, this is where we're at. Okay, next slide. And then these are just details I can flip back to if there are questions about what the numbers are behind those charts. Okay, so again, getting to what we're doing now to currently in the way of existing resources for affordable housing to try and fill in some of that need in those lower income categories. We do get federal HUD block grant dollars each year. We also get the Home Investment Partnership funds, the local housing levy that Bellingham has passed a couple of times now, and also the affordable housing sales tax funds. And a few other sources, including general fund dollars from Bellingham. That last year was about $14 million. We do that, that goes up just a little bit each year. With that, we put that money towards production of permanently affordable rental housing. About 60% of that money goes towards production of rental housing. We also do renter and homebuyer down payment assistance to get people into housing. We have the housing rehab program to do preservation of existing housing stock through home rehabilitation loans. That program has been around since the late 70s. We also provide a broad support suite of supportive human services and support organizations in the community that provide human services. And so those are all, again, monies that we direct to the community. All of those volunteer or partner organizations, nonprofits in the community, and federal and state dollars allow us to leverage local dollars at about a 1-to-8 ratio. So that's an important thing. We do the most we can with that money and put it to good use, and our nonprofit partners are a huge part of making that work. Okay, the next slide, please. And then these are some of the incentives that we offer. We hope that these incentives will encourage private development to help us make a dent in those lower income categories. We've opened up the zoning and land capacity, and we really hope that this helps push some of those 50 to 80 income units down into those 30 to 50 or even 0 to 30%. Some of the things we do is we provide significant density bonuses for affordable housing projects. That could includes increased floor counts in our urban village areas where we do floor area ratios. We allow them to add additional stories without additional fees. We reduce impact fees, and that includes your park, your transportation impact fees. We reduce the utility system development charges. We've just dramatically expanded and increased our multifamily tax exemption program. Increased the rates to allow more projects to qualify to provide a 12-year tax exemption to property developers that choose to do a 12-year a percentage of units at affordable rates. We also have federal opportunity zones around Western and Samish Way. And then we do expedited project and permit review for projects that offer affordability. So really doing everything we possibly can, pulling all the levers to encourage private development to step up to the table and do even a small percentage of their units in ranges that are affordable to those lower income ranges. I think that's the end of what I've got. So I'm happy to answer any questions related to our growth proposal.
Commissioner Brown.
First off, Matt, would you make sure we get all these presentations?
Yeah, Eileen will send those to you.
Yeah, great. And then, Chris, I had 2 questions. The removal of the LLI between Ferndale and Bellingham, was that included in the recent Port of Bellingham analysis?
I don't believe that was included in there. I know that those industrial zones were part of the report that they did. So in other words, they showed those as industrial lands, not being downzoned, for instance, to rural lands. So that was, they include, I think in the cut sheets in the back of that document, you can see the details for like that Curtis Road and the Cope Road light industrial areas and the area south of Slater Road on the other side of the highway.
I'd like to encourage you to communicate with Tyler Schroeder. And at least so we've all got consensus that we're working off the same data.
Yeah, we are in close conversations with Tyler and the port on that study, and we have some follow-up studies we'd like to do to kind of leverage that work that they've already started. So yeah, and we have fed them quite a bit of data for that study as well. So we're definitely tracking that with them.
Could you go back? I just wanted to go back to that slide where you showed the housing ratio and the change based on funding. I assume Matt's looking for that.
Yeah, I think you probably, it's on either slide 8 or 10 are the two that do that.
We can't see. Oh, there we go.
I think
No,
it's
further on, it was the one with the bar graph.
there you go.
Yeah, okay. So two questions. One is, or two comments. The challenge I've always had with providing government funding housing support with local dollars is you take money from, in order to support the poor, you take money from the almost poor, because the source of funding is property tax and sales tax. So we actually push more people into a housing crisis by doing that. So that's just sort of a general comment. And on the next slide, I think we talk about the $14 million. Maybe it was the slide after that. Oh well, that was the one where you're doing a value shift or a tax shift. But I think you talked about the 14. Yeah.
Oh, I think I keep going, Matt. I think it's a slide after this where we talk about our different funding mechanisms. There you go.
Yeah, okay, that one. So what is it? The question was $14 million. What does that get us in terms of units?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, about 60% of that goes to actual production of subsidized housing projects. Examples would be like the picture there, the Millworks family housing down on the waterfront. Bellingham, we've built over the last 20 plus years, we've built about 1,500 units using those dollars. And again, those dollars of, it's 14 million this last year. It was much less than that 20 years ago. But using that money in the Bellingham community, we've built about 1,500 units. What it works out to on an annual basis is an average, like over the last 10 years, somewhere around 70 to 80 or so units a year. And I'll say that, we're not able to pull off a project with a partner in the community every year. Like Millworks is more than 70 some units. And there's a phase 2 that'll be more. But every year or so, we're able to complete something like, the Walton project or the Samish Way, Samish Commons, or here Millworks with a partner in the community using those dollars. To meet the need, like I said, to push that down into that 0 to 30 general category or the permanent supportive category, to meet the need, even having double that number wouldn't satisfy the whole need. So that, just to put a number to it, you could have $30 million a year going to it if somehow, we found a pot of money that would produce that. And we still wouldn't satisfy the need. We'd make great progress, but it's just the need is so acute for those subsidies. That's where we hope that things like the multifamily tax exemption program, where you get a lot of housing across the spectrum, because in that project, an ideal 12-year MFTE program, you might have 100 units being built, and 20% of them are renting at affordable rates, and the other 80 are market rate. And so that allows it to balance out a little bit better. that's where we'd love to see greater participation in that program, and why we've expanded it to all of our urban villages, and then also to the new middle housing areas, which really are all the residential areas in the city. So again, we're hopeful that tweaking that program and expanding it will maybe provide some pickup in that area, because that's an area that would really, again, have private development bringing a lot of those units to the table. And then having the offset of that tax benefit for them, providing that means to provide the discount for folks. So,
But if you take that 14 million, I'm trying to wrap my head around how much money in subsidies per unit does a developer get, and what other financial support or discounts or fee waivers do they get? I'm trying to total that up to work it out. What is that total amount of money versus the cost of building that unit?
yeah, I don't have the numbers to share with you right now. I know Tara in our development services section in our community development section would be able to give you those numbers, or Sammy, our housing program manager. I can tell you that when I've heard them describe projects in the last couple of years, you're talking about $400,000 per unit typically, or more, for a subsidized rental unit, an apartment in one of these buildings. So yeah, it's a tough environment. But again,
400,000 to construct, not 400,000 in subsidies, right?
well, for the fully subsidized projects, again, it's money coming from a variety of sources, including the nonprofits themselves. But again, there's federal, state, local sales tax, local property tax dollars, a wide variety of funds that are put together at that, and then kind of leveraged at that 1-to-8 ratio.
But did you say 400,000 per project, 400,000 per unit, or the unit inside a dwelling unit is 400,000? What's the 400,000?
That 400,000 is the cost of construction to build one of these subsidized units.
It's a single unit inside the building.
That's like a single apartment.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, pardon me if I didn't quite catch everything on the extent what the utilities are looking for looking like at the North Bellingham UGA expansion. But when I think about more UGA's expansion, it makes me wonder about why we can't make more of the UGAs we have. For instance, the Alderwood UGA, where there's people who have lots that are zoned and they would like to put in additional units there, but they can't get city utilities out to them. And I'm just wondering what the push-pull is here of adding new UGAs when the city isn't stepping up to the plate to service the ones it already has.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think what you're seeing is there are existing areas that we're recommending stay in the urban growth area, that do have some development capacity, even though like you mentioned Alderwood, that's a great example. That's an area that developed over the last 40 years, largely because Bellingham chose to extend utilities into that area before we developed a policy not to do that, once growth management came along. And for that reason, you've got the neighborhood out there that is there today. That being said, there isn't enough development capacity there to meet our growth capacity shortfall that we find ourselves with. And so that's why we are proposing to bring some areas in. We are absolutely also hoping to bring Alderwood in during this growth period, which is why we've left it in the urban growth area. We do feel like there is some development capacity there, particularly with the new changes related to House Bill 1110. We also feel like it's an area that should be in the city. We've provided the services to create an urban environment, and that area needs to have the benefit of the full range of urban services. If you've heard any of our recent council meetings where consideration was given to the Northern Heights annexation area. We're not in a position right now to bring areas in and extend, in particular, public safety services to these areas or to build a significant amount of new infrastructure. Some of the things like culverts to meet fish passage, rectify fish passage barriers, and those kinds of things are particularly costly, and they're things that the city budget right now just won't support. But they are things that we hope during the planning period to bring in. To that end, we do have policies in the land use chapter that put a little more muscle behind development and refinement of our annexation plan. That'll be on our work program starting next year. And part of that will be to pre-zone the UGA, including these areas we're contemplating bringing in, which might mean proposed changes to some of the zoning in that area. And also to put more detail into all of our capital facility plans for these areas and come up with a more phased approach. Part of that also is looking at the ways that we annex. Bellingham, like most cities, has largely had a petition-driven process in the past, which is unpredictable. It's hard to say when groups of owners will get organized, how much area they'll be proposing, and when they'll come forward. And so having thoughtful capital infrastructure planning and service planning go forward when you don't know when petitions are going to come forward is very inefficient and makes it very challenging. And so we'll be exploring more methods that the state provides, like the interlocal agreement method, where Bellingham could partner with Whatcom County and with the fire authority to designate an area to be annexed on a schedule, and then be, again, very thoughtful about how we could bring an area in every 5 years or so, and time infrastructure investments to come online at the appropriate time.
Commissioner Dunn.
I got a couple of questions about the UGR for U Street. Matt, earlier you mentioned that there's gonna be a meeting tomorrow. You talk with the city county planners and you might decide, have a consensus that all UGAR is just gonna perhaps not be included. Did I hear you right for that?
Well, no, the new proposals to add urban growth area reserves. So that doesn't affect existing ones.
Okay, so in Bellingham, U Street, there's not a discussion about removing that from UGAR status?
No.
Okay, sounds good. So Chris, in that UGAR, down there, U Street, I know you said it was expensive to build because of the roads. I understand that. Have you talked with the developers, a few large kind of landowners there, about the cost sharing for that and how that would impact the city?
We talked a little bit. We've heard from at least 3 of the property owners down there, and we've met with them over the past year at different points. And we understand that they are very willing in some cases to participate in those discussions. That's not what at the end of the day, what was driving the staff recommendation to choose the north area over the south area. It was really just our best estimate overall capacity. And then really, we had to choose one area or the other because we just understand not just the development of infrastructure, but the cost of providing city services has an impact. And we just felt like it would be disingenuous and really set false expectations to say we are going to bring that area in during the planning period, when really what we're focused on, if we focus on, we have the resources to focus on one or the other of those areas, but not both, is really what it comes down to. We are not saying that we don't expect the areas in the Samish neighborhood, in the North U Street UGA area, or the south end of the Whatcom Falls area to not have some level of development. We are counting about 25% of what we expect the total capacity to be to happen during this planning period, based on, we do expect there to be some incremental development. We just know that we are unlikely to have the resources to pull off the full range of urban services that would allow the other 75% of that development to happen during this planning period. And that's just, again, us trying to be as transparent and honest as we can with the overall community on where we think our resources will be used.
Okay, that's fair enough. And in that area, there's currently Bellingham water derived to the south part of U Street, is that Bellingham Sewer as well down there?
There is a major sewer line that goes along Samish Way, north of Lake Padden Park. Is that where you're talking about?
Yeah, and it looks like there's from the Bellingham water plant, looks like there's water that goes up the hill there, up along U Street to provide water some of those developments.
There are some areas in there that are on water service and water service contracts at least.
Okay.
And those are historic contracts, and there's capacity in there that serve those folks.
There's an elementary school inside that UGR as well, Wade King.
That is within the elementary school is within the UGA reserve area.
Okay, and then currently who provides fire and police services out there?
It's South Whatcom Fire provides the fire service, and then the county sheriff is the law enforcement.
Okay, and some of those areas are pretty well built. And I guess I'm saying like there's already places there that have water, sewer, fire, police, schools. Like except for a library, there's not much more you'd want to put there to make that kind of a fully urban area. So I guess is there any workaround between if it's only staff and like city capacity? Is there any workaround there to meet capacity, or maybe to layer them in, bring in Kitech, in the next 10 years, and then turn this to UGA and bring U Street South in maybe after that, still within the 20-year planning period?
Yeah, I think knowing that we're planning for a 20-year horizon, but we do a periodic update every 10 years. And so we will absolutely be doing this analysis again, starting 8 years from now and finishing 10 years from now. And this whole conversation will be happening again. And just 5 years from now, we'll be doing a buildable lands analysis to see kind of how we're performing on these, the implementation of these land use changes we're all making. So yes, that area will come up again for consideration in the next periodic update.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Bright.
I just want to check if Commissioner Eisenberg still had their hand raised, just as I saw it, I wanted to make sure.
Thank you for acknowledging that. You did a wonderful, well, thank you, first off, the whole City of Bellingham Engaged series and working with the elementary and the high schools and the community at large. And thank you so much for the work that you and your staff have done and interns from Western's urban planning. You did answer 2 of my questions that I had when my hand was raised. However, something that Dan Dunn said is making me wonder a little bit more about that infrastructure and and just building in spaces. I know that he's a very smart. Everyone in this space are really intellectual and smart. I'm just curious to know more about the role that the citizens play, like the private owners in those UGAs, and how they've been contacted or consulted. Or, for example, the Alderwood, which I'm in, 7 years ago, we all got a letter in the mail to come. I guess you talked about the petition process, but now that the city has annexed all around, wouldn't it be time that the city of Bellingham could annex the Alderwood UGA in this comprehensive planning period, which then would allow for House Bill 1110 to activate the half-acre and full-acre lots to be able to, I guess, double the amount of housing stock that's in this particular neighborhood? Would you have the answers to that question by any chance?
Well, I can't tell you when we would be annexing, other than to say that we would, under this plan, we would anticipate that these areas would come in during the planning period. So by 2045, as far as when in the planning period, Alderwood or the Northern Heights area or any other part of our unincorporated growth area would be annexed. That's really that annexation plan I was speaking to, where we would take a deep dive and look at pre-zoning each area, contemplate changing some of the zoning based on what the city allows within the city limits. Also look at what are the critical infrastructure elements that are not present in some of these areas, but are necessary for further development. Look at all of those things, cost them out, and come up with a phasing plan to say it makes sense to bring a certain area in, and then maybe wait 5 years and bring another area in, and so on around the urban growth area.
Understandably, and that would be coming out of, you mentioned a work group or something at the beginning of or early next year, something about a work group is what
Yeah, Bellingham, we're on schedule to update this comprehensive plan, the Bellingham plan that I'm just you're seeing some content from tonight and the urban growth boundary for it. That is on schedule to be adopted by the end of this year. And then we have about 6 months, the first half of 2026, we have a series of code updates that we need to finalize to be compliant with state law around housing and the way we process permits and approve permits and the design review regulations. Once we have finished that, the next big project that our group here at the city from a long-range planning perspective is going to launch into is the annexation plan. And so that will be a piece that we start midway through next year. We would anticipate that probably going about midway through 2027. There's a lot of work that needs to go into that. And then that would set up the conversation with our city council, with the county, with the fire authority to look at these areas and start to have conversations around, based on the data and planning work that went into that document, can we set up a schedule and start to be more proactive through some interlocal agreements to bring areas like Alderwood or the light industrial area at the north end of the town of Bellingham that's been under consideration for more than a decade. To bring
13
some of
years. Yeah, not to cut you off, but for sake of time, I'm also curious to know, knowing that planning, the interagency agreement has been there as a framework and how we work together. I'm also curious to know with the Evergreen Sustainable Development Standard and the Home Trust Fund, which would allow that revolving fund to be helping private and public partnerships. Someone mentioned about community land trust. There are community developers out there. There are private citizens that want to do this work that aren't being, first off, invited to the table or informed of these type of decisions. So I'm curious to know more about how the city of Bellingham, the counties are looking at sustainable development standards and making sure that we are also looking at housing through that climate impact lens and the transit development oriented goals that the Department of Transportation has also put out there, and how you overlay all of those reports to then incentivize the ADUs, the multifamily, the low income, all of the missing middle that we've talked about for years. But then how do we put the sense of urgency on it so that it's not 2045 when we finally have housing, that we have it before 2030 when Senate Bill 5713 expires for limited equity cooperatives to not have to pay property taxes. So, there's a lot of information out there, but when I think as a planning commissioner, how much I have to work to be in this space, I think about the everyday citizen that I meet every day or in my classroom or on my field or in the courts, and that we're doing a disservice to that next generation. Very poorly to our students and our learners and our families that we need to be providing housing. So I guess it's not a question or a comment. It's just maybe putting a little fire to the flame for your feet of making sure that the sense of urgency from a planning commissioner lens to the city of Bellingham's staff is mentioned in those work groups, to either be invited and asked for community developers that have private lands that want to be at the table for some of those strategies that you've mentioned in this report.
No, I really appreciate your comment. Seriously, we really do. We understand and really appreciate that perspective as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Bright.
Chris, could you talk to us a little bit more about what the thinking is and the plan for the area, the North UGA, which I believe is North Bellingham Golf Course?
Yeah, the Kitech USA is the majority owner. They own the golf course, the south half of which is in that area. There are also about a dozen other private owners that are in the area immediately east of their ownership between Meridian and the golf course. And then, as I said, there are about 6 parcels that are immediately south of Larson Road in a little rectangle configuration that are not currently in the reserve, but we're proposing bringing them in because it creates a logical boundary, and importantly, it encompasses the Larson Road right-of-way, which is the easterly access point kind of midway through that golf course property from Meridian inwards there. So yeah, so we're anticipating, like we said, the estimate is capacity for about 1,300 homes on that in that 360 or so acres. And that's importantly, that's during the planning period. That's based on a production rate that is close to just slightly higher than what Kitech has been able to pull off with the development they've been working on for a number of years and are nearly finished with in the north end of the existing city limits, north of Horton Road. And we, again, the process, we don't know exactly how long it'll take, but just kind of putting it in broad strokes, if the plan is approved this year and that area is included in the boundary, there could be an annexation proposal floated next year. We would be concurrent with that, doing a large amount of planning with that annexation plan I had referred to, with pre-zoning areas like this and the rest of the UGA. And then as part of an annexation, there could be something like a development agreement or other mechanism that the city has to provide what the expectations are for this area. Again, like I said in the land use chapter, we have specific goals and policies around being more intentional about getting true urban density out of these areas that we're making really significant investments in the community in. And so that would be part of that conversation, is what are the expectations? Once that's established, if the area is brought into the city, there's also a good amount of work done on the land use enablement side, the subdivision process, the planning and extension of roads and utilities. So we would anticipate it being at least 5 years into the planning period before you'd likely see building permits coming online and maybe something being built out there. That's, again, really back in the napkin, high level estimate, but that gives you an idea of kind of what our estimate is based on. And then the housing production level, 70 to 100 units per year, is in the range of what KITAC has been able to do. There are, again, a small number of other owners out there as well. And so just projecting that forward for the 15 remaining years of the planning period, that's where that 100 or 1,300 units over the planning period comes from. The mix of housing that's proposed out there is based somewhat on their conceptual plan that they've floated, which isn't an adopted plan, but it's just something that they've been nursing along for a very long time. And it's evolved as thinking around housing has changed statewide. It currently includes a large percentage, more than half, in what we would call middle housing styles. And again, those the housing that's been built at the north end of Cordata has been in what could be called the middle income category. There are also some higher density urban nodes proposed where we would expect to see multifamily style housing, which we would hope would go into those lower income ranges. And then there's opportunities that there could be opportunities for partnering with some of those nonprofits that we have operating in other parts of the community to maybe provide some of those lower, like 0 to 30% or 30 to 50% subsidized housing products, potentially with wraparound the on-site services. Again, the thinking we have for that area is it's generally flat. It certainly does have some critical areas, but there aren't any areas left in Bellingham that don't have critical areas impacting them. But we do feel like there is the potential for development capacity there to meet that gap that we have, and also in the range of housing affordability levels that we need. And then also, because it's flat, you can have those bicycle, pedestrian, transit options just become much easier to accomplish, the circulation pattern and things like that. So that's kind of the broad thinking that's gone into it. Certainly, if this area is included, there would certainly be another level of detail that we would need to achieve before this area could come online and start to be an area that develops.
That's really helpful. I mean, I think, had you all not been able to do what you did in Cordata and so successfully be able to create a mix of housing, I think I would be highly skeptical. I'm still skeptical, but I'd be highly skeptical of sprawling north in such a way that's basically going into open space. I still don't love it, and I don't even think I like it. But the way you're thinking about it at least makes me not hate it. I think we're gonna have some big conversations about whether or not that is a wise way to expand the city.
Yeah, I think what I would call to your attention though is just that, we look at a couple things. One, it's the first planning cycle and a couple of planning cycles where we are proposing a boundary expansion. So we're pretty thoughtful and cautious about that. Also knowing that expanding your territory is expensive just from an urban services standpoint. And also I just remember I talked about those urban villages. Those are, again, 4% of our land area, providing about a third of our growth capacity. We can't do it all in that form. And so that's where we want to have a balance. We're doing some really high density stuff in those urban villages. We're doing some other significant changes, very significant changes in all the existing neighborhoods with the House Bill 1110 middle housing capacity. And we do feel like along with that, we need some territorial expansion just to provide that capacity sooner, because we know that those neighborhood infill projects take resources. A lot of the property owners don't have those enough resources to make that growth happen soon enough for our growth capacity needs. That's more of a slow burn that's going to happen over a longer period of time. So we feel like we need this kind of balanced approach. We agree also that we are cautious and there are drawbacks to growing your boundary, but we also look at, well, if we can accommodate people there instead of 3 or 4 miles further out on Hemi Road or Pole Road or something, those are trade-offs we're willing to make, and those do have countywide implications.
First, I'm beginning to ask if we can speed it up just a little bit. Some things about, you're thinking someday you'll expand here or there. What can we stick more to what's going on with the proposed UGA? We have 2 more to do, and public hearings and so on. And I'd appreciate that. Thanks. So, Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, just quickly, I can't see where all the lakes are, but I'm on that retain the 520 acre UGA reserve. How does that dovetail with cleaning up the TMDL in Lake Padden? Are we looking towards additional growth in that area where the water quality is so greatly challenged, and if so, or even if not so, what is going on with additional stormwater treatment to take care of that problem?
Yeah, again, we're proposing to leave that area in reserve status and not bring it into the urban growth area at this point. And I guess I would say that any development that does happen in an area that does drain to Lake Padden would be subject to our current stormwater standards, which are designed to prevent that kind of infiltration of pollutants into those areas like Lake Padden.
Okay, thanks. They haven't worked too well so far.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, the area to the north of the airport is proposed to go from UGA to UGAR. Would that change the zoning at all in that area?
That's something we'd be in conversation with Whatcom County about. My understanding is that when an area gets removed from the UGA and put in either just rural status or reserve status, that it then gets assigned rural zoning. So one potential zone could be the rural 10 acre zone, one housing unit per 10 acres would be an example of the kind of zoning that could be applied to that.
And what's the zoning currently at there? It's in the light industrial zoning?
It's currently, that area is mostly light industrial. There is, like I said, a corridor of general commercial that parallels I-5.
And it is currently in that zoning?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Brown.
A couple of questions, Chris. The UGA on the U Street, the part that you're proposing to put in, and the part you're proposing for UGA reserve, are either of those the parcels that were taken out in the last segment?
The crosshatched area you see on the map there that is the current UGA reserve used to be part of Bellingham's UGA, and the county council chose to remove it in 2009 based on capacity estimates, and there was a discussion of water quality issues at that point.
So I remember that conversation. The argument, as I recall from the city, was it was too expensive to upgrade the downstream sewer lines from the development. How's that being addressed?
I don't believe that the sewer line in that area that parallels U Street itself has been upgraded. That is one of those things that we looked at when we were doing the analysis of infrastructure for this area. So that is one of those pieces that would need to be addressed at some point in the future were this area to further develop.
That's for the reserve area or the UGA area?
That sewer line would primarily serve the UGA reserve area. The slope break for wastewater that flows north down U Street towards Lakeway or south is very close to the elementary school location at the top of the hill there, which is very close to the boundary separating the reserve from the existing UGA.
Okay. And then my next question was, the city of Blaine had 1,000 units, over 1,000 units scheduled inside their city limits for development, and they were, you know, the permits had all been issued, or sorry, the entitlements had all been granted. And that was then ultimately sold to someone who decides they want to turn it into one residential property and be taken out of the city completely. Given that you can have someone with a large amount of money come along and just say, I want to buy that whole UGA and turn it into one residence. How has the city considered how it would deal with that if, for example, that happened to Kaiteng?
Well, I think that's one of the critical pieces in our conversation around residential zoning in particular, that we're talking with the city council about adopting minimum densities to prevent something. I mean, that's a very extreme example you're portraying there, but even just the example of, you know, if you've got a 1 acre lot and you could just put a home on it, or you could put, you know, 6 or 10 or 12 on it, we would, you know, we are suggesting and had that discussion with the city council about adopting a uniform citywide minimum density for our low density, and then a different one for our medium density, and then one for our high density zones, similar to what we have today for our residential multi-zones. To basically to prevent what you're describing, and to make sure that when we do have infrastructure investments in areas, we leverage those with urban development.
Yeah, maybe described as an extreme example, but I was very involved in the discussion to try and get the infrastructure into that area, and the city of Blaine was just unwilling to participate in the infrastructure, even though we offered to provide a source of funding. And I understand, and so it ended up, you know, getting the guy just ran out of patience, ran out of money, ran out of patience. And my understanding is that the West Britain proposed annexation was turned down, and has now been voted for reconsideration. But again, my understanding is that the city of Bellingham turned that down because they didn't like the infrastructure cost. So my question is, you know, we can talk about this being extreme examples, but we've got to deal with the infrastructure cost issue. Otherwise, none of these UGAs are going to be developed.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think that's the primary question is, and it's not just the hard infrastructure, it's the ongoing urban services that are supplied, whether it's public safety or the maintenance of those roads and other things that get built. Those are all very significant and daunting issues. And that's what those recent conversations around Northern Heights, that's what our city council is struggling with. A current budget crisis, and then looking forward to 10 or 20 years out, and what are these areas going to translate into in the way of needs and those services. So again, that's part of what that annexation plan will be looking at, is the fiscal impact analysis, connecting that with the land use, and then trying to come up with a logical phasing kind of plan as to when it makes sense to bring these areas in, and trying to get ahead of those costs and say, okay, here's how we can anticipate and plan for these. It doesn't mean we're going to find a pot of money somewhere. So some of these timelines, you know, might be longer than what we would expect. But that's part of that critical work, is trying to be realistic and honest about that. Again, and that's just getting back to that south and north reserve areas. That's part of why we're only suggesting one of those areas come in, because we just know there's only so much we can do in the next 10 or 20 years. And the next 10 in particular, because that's the time we have until this plan gets updated again. Again, just trying to be transparent and realistic and not set false expectations.
I'll just finish up. We solved that problem for Blaine by offering to use the EDI money to seed a utility local improvement district. So I would just encourage the city of Bellingham to consider the same proposal, because there is actually money there.
We've talked about that EDI fund, and yeah, that's something that I think Bellingham is certainly thinking about, is factoring that fund into maybe some of the needs for these areas.
Commissioner Dunn.
With your housing targets, you're fairly close to what you want to do with what you're planning on doing. Let's say if you were to shrink that by 5%, instead of being over by 500, you'd be under by 400, something like that. And I think a lot of your density and growth relies on policy changes that will be enacted by ordinance through the city council. Knowing there's an election coming up and who knows what the outcome of that will be. How much of that do you think will come through in the next couple of months before January 1st? And then what's the risk profile for if the city council changes? Especially knowing things like, Britain Road, like didn't go through the first time, they reconsidered it, now got a couple of years to try and do it again. So the city council can be fickle sometimes. How much of those policy changes that need to be by ordinance are you feeling you're gonna be able to get through before January?
Well, we do have an aggressive schedule. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we do have a number of one interim ordinances that have already been approved, like the interim middle housing ordinance that was approved a couple of months ago. We're in the process of bringing forward amendments to bring the rest of our ADU code into final alignment with House Bill 1337. That's going to Planning Commission in a few weeks, and we would anticipate that being adopted by the end of the year. Similarly, we're bringing forward co-living amendments to be in alignment with changes, again, to some of those 2023 changes to state housing laws. There will be proposed changes based on our design review process, the permit review process, and a variety of other initiatives, but most of them centered around those 2023 kind of landmark legislative package changes that the state passed. Again, some of those we've adopted interims in the past year, and then we are trying to move forward with permanent changes, and some of them we will be addressing. Some of those changes that we haven't addressed yet, we will be proposing interims and then dealing with those again later in 2026. So if you look at our legislative schedule, we have something going just about every week. So.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, just going back to that north area above the airport. So when an area is rural or residential and it gets pulled out and down zone to an R10 or something, doesn't have maybe as much impact. Do you have any idea how many businesses and light industrial properties that have been developed as light industrial properties are now all of a sudden just in a R10 zoning, that now they're all, non-conforming uses and non-conforming businesses up there?
Yeah, we have looked at that, and there definitely are a few. I would say there are not a lot. There are probably more in the way of commercial uses in the general commercial zone that fronts on the Pacific Highway going up the east side of Interstate 5, starting up at the intersection with the company that does the landscaping rock and things, and then working south from there. Out in on the far west end, the Curtis Road industrial area, between Curtis Road and the Burlington Northern Main Line, there is a lumber manufacturing place. There are a few others in those areas. There's some mini storage places. It's not a dense array of development out there, partly because the area is so completely covered by critical areas, wetlands, ponds, streams, and forest cover. But yeah, there are some uses out there. The north end of the block of land west of I-5 owned by the Lummi tribe, most of you have probably seen, there's the truck stop, mini market, gas station, a few other things out there. So there are definitely development out there, and that would be a conversation that we will have with Whatcom County about what the potential, how those at that point, what would be non-conforming uses are treated, and what potential impacts would be. So yeah, definitely something to consider, and it's a conversation that we'll be having with the county.
Yeah, because even if it's not a lot of parcels per se, it's pretty impactful on those parcels and property owners, especially if you're talking about that truck stop that they're still building that out right now. And so if that zoning gets changed, that's a pretty drastic change for them. So since you seem not concerned that things are going to get built out because there's so much wetlands there, what's the concern with just leaving it in its current status and not disrupting all those businesses there?
We just, when we do the math on it, there is some additional development capacity out there. But the fact that it's all north and west of the airport, and north of our mitigation bank that we have out in that area on between Northwest and I-5, we just don't feel like we will be annexing out there during this planning period. And so that's what's really driving that suggestion, is just we don't feel like we will be accessing that capacity, which is one of those reasons why we feel like it should be out of our UGA. There is also the argument for some separation between Bellingham and Ferndale, and that's one of the factors we considered. But really, the main one was just that we won't realistically be annexing out there. And while there are some of those businesses that are active in the area, and some of them have been there for quite some time, we just don't feel like there's additional capacity that warrants leaving it in our growth boundary.
Okay, so then, Matt, I have a question for you. What latitude do we have in what that zoning becomes if it gets designated as the UGA reserve? Is it, I know there's generally a policy to make it go to R10, but just knowing what's going on there, are we stuck with that, or what are our options?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of options. You know, in limited areas of more intensive rural development, you can have, you know, rural industrial manufacturing or rural commercial, but I don't know if these would qualify, you know, as landmarks. Out in the county, there's, you know, just in the rural 10, there's less latitude. Our zoning code, you know, does allow non-conforming uses to continue. Expansion requires a conditional use permit. If something, you know, were to burn down or something, they can replace it in the same footprint. You know, that type of thing. And sometimes you hear of possibly having more trouble getting financing for, you know, non-conforming expansions or whatever, so.
But like the property, there's still some, I think there's still some areas that have been, you know, they put the infrastructure in there around the truck stop, but they haven't built out fully some of those buildings there. They would just be stuck at that point, what they've got there.
You can get a conditional, you can apply for a conditional use permit to expand a non-conforming use. So it's just a additional, you know, you have to go to the hearing examiner. It's a discretionary.
Even if there's not a business there, if it's just an undeveloped part
Oh,
of
it's
that property.
undeveloped? Okay, yeah, then you would have to conform to the rural 10-acre zoning code.
Commissioner Hanson.
Just want to point out that there's a designated wildlife corridor there that the budding UGAs was blocking, and I applaud moving back that UGA, and I'd like to see some permanent protections for that wildlife corridor.
I hear you, Jim.
You say you would like to see permanent protections in the wildlife corridor.
More comments in the public hearing. You want to do a couple more comments in the public hearing, just to get that?
Yeah, you know, we'd like to get. Or any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Brown.
Chris, and this is to Chris and to Matt. I'd like to discourage you from removing all that area from the UGA. I know the area fairly well. I know the area immediately west of the airport is very wet. But the area sort of southeast of Marietta and Curtis and east of Winroad, I think should really remain in the UGA. Certainly should remain in the light industrial category because there's so little light industrial land around. And that area is close to the freeway and relatively close to utilities. I'm not saying there's industrial utilities in the street, but to simply take it out and put it into rural, I think is diminishing an already very constrained light industrial land supply.
Any other questions for Chris?
I don't really have a specific response. I hear your concern. I would say that there was mention made earlier of the industrial land study that the port has recently completed, and we are in conversations with Tyler there about kind of next steps for that. And I know Bellingham has some next steps that we're contemplating to do further analysis on our own industrial land base within the city to do a little bit deeper dive, dig into not just the land capacity supply pieces, but also looking at the wages and specific industry sectors and specific service needs for those. So I guess I'd say there's more work to come. I will say when we have looked at the variety of environmental constraints in those areas, both east and west of I-5, that the areas we're proposing to pull out are honestly more than 80% impacted by wetlands, streams, and their buffers. And some of the mapping we have in that area is reasonably tight. We've had NES and other local wetland experts go out and do not just reconnaissance level surveys, but actual delineation level work in some of those areas. And it's difficult to find developable land in any of those areas.
Yeah, I'm just saying be more surgical. The other thing I'd say is that the reference to the city's wetlands mitigation bank, the reality is the city doesn't have anything close to the amount of mitigation necessary just for stuff inside of city limits. I wouldn't say that this should be removed because because of your mitigation bank restraints. Any mitigation for this area is going to have to come from somewhere other than the city anyway, no matter what happens.
Yeah, I think our comment related to the mitigation bank was more its physical location, and that it's it's currently in an area zoned light industrial between I-5 and Northwest, just south of it's in the area that we would propose leaving in the UGA, but the likelihood that we would extend services through that to the area north beyond is unlikely. In particular, that area north of the mitigation bank is within the aviation clearance area for the airport for the main runway. So it's not just the environmental constraints. There's some other pieces at play there that kind of limit what can be done in that corridor.
For clarity, I'm more concerned about the southeast corner of Wynn Road and Slater Road, which is that area that's east of the Lummi development and west of the freeway, which is shown as an open field. And I think it's more likely to be developable, certainly in the right location. Anyway, that's my comment. I'll yield.
Any other? Okay. Eileen, would you open the public hearing? Eileen, would you take over, please?
Yes. This is for the city of Bellingham. Do we have anyone in the room that wants to speak? We'll go with Peter Fraser first. You're given 3 minutes.
My name is Peter Fraser. I've submitted a comment letter signed by 19 of us, builders, employers, small business leaders, economic development voices, and landowners, representing those who build and provide housing and family wage jobs here. The FEIS itself acknowledges that UGA expansions may be necessary if current capacity proves inadequate. That point has already arrived. Excluding South U ignores the reality of Bellingham's housing obligations, economic development needs, and infrastructure systems. South U is the key that unlocks coordinated growth across South U, North U, and the Samish area. Without it, the largest undeveloped parcels inside the city remain orphaned. North U cannot be feasibly served, and the south and east side of the city remains in limbo. Exclusion also undermines fiscal prudence. Every year of delay means lost tax base for schools, parks, infrastructure. It pushes growth outward into more costly dispersed patterns. And it doubles down on a flawed decision based on outdated watershed studies, even though extending sewer and stormwater systems would improve water quality at Lake Pad. Environmentally, the choice is backwards. Older neighborhoods targeted for infill are the primary contributor to stormwater pollution in Bellingham Bay, while new development is required to treat runoff and integrate buffers, open space, and green infrastructure. Well-planned growth in the Samish area would yield cleaner outcomes than relying on infill. Economically, employers will only grow here if housing is available nearby. Employers in advanced manufacturing, healthcare, education, and the public sector already struggle to recruit because their workforce cannot afford to live here. Failing to plan for housing that meets the needs of the professional workforce will cascade downward, worsening affordability for everyone. Precisely the dynamic HB 1220 was designed to prevent. Transportation arguments also cut the other way. Improving U Street and adding local connections would reduce pressure on Lakeway and I-5. Those solutions depend on coordinated planning in South U. By keeping this area in reserve, the FEIS forecloses that opportunity. Finally, I want to remind you that the county has the authority to act independently of the city's recommendations. In the past, the county has used that authority when the broader public interest required it. This is one of those times. We urge you to exercise that authority again to restore South U to the UGA and ensure Bellingham carries its fair share of growth for the good of the entire county. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Matt Connor, and I am one of the owners in the South U Street UGA. I own a small parcel there. I want to first start by thanking, having sat through this meeting now for 2.5 hours, I even mean it more. I thank you guys all for your service here and what you do. I have a whole list of bullet points that were a lot covered by Mr. Frazier. So let me just first start by saying to you, Commissioner Dunn, the answer to the question that you posed to Mr. Behe earlier tonight is that the follow-up and the cooperation from the city, the questions they've asked us, anything they've said to us has been very half-hearted. I would say miserable at best, okay? They have not cooperated with developers. They've not answered any of those questions for you that you posed to us. They haven't sought to come up with cooperative solutions with the people that own the property there to address any of the issues the city raises. They keep saying, oh, it's cost, it's infrastructure, it's this, it's that, it's the other, right? But they have taken no affirmative action whatsoever to reach out to the people that actually own the property and come up with some creative solutions. Mr. Brown, you talked about EDI, I don't even know what that means. But the interesting thing is they don't even approach us with any solutions, any sort of thing. So I think the frustration that we all have as people in the community that actually own the land is that they're saying, hey, let's develop north, right? Great, do that, but also add the South U Street UGA. It doesn't really instantaneously cause any infrastructure costs or anything like that. All we're saying is like, look, plan for the development, put it in the UGA. Let's start having the conversation. Let's reach out. It forces the city to at least start talking, at least start reaching out and coming up with solutions to the area that honestly, when you look at the map, makes the most sense. That's why you don't like the idea of going north, right? Because there's other huge block of land that makes more sense. The only argument the city has said for not including the South UGA in the UGA is cost, but they don't want to talk to the people about actually solving that problem, right? And so I say, put it in the UGA, right? And then that forces the conversation with the city. They're happy to let the cost of servicing the urban growth that you pointed out that's already there to the county and let the county pay the bill and foot that indefinitely if they don't put it in the UGA and start talking about the plan, right? So I would urge you as one of the property owners to at least ask the city to show you the math. They won't do it for us. You can demand it, we can't. So as all of you as individuals, I just say, the city will not show us the math. How did they arrive at the cost? What are the solutions? They won't work with us on any of that. So show us the map. that you guys can demand that, demand it of the city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else in the room wish to speak? Moving to those online. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands, Chair.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioner McCary.
I don't know how much people have left on Bellingham. We got two more to talk about after this. Just because we had the public hearings, noticed and for this, does it make sense to make sure we get through those and then come back to any of these? Just putting that
Question later for all questions.
Yeah, just putting that out there, just to make sure, so we, if we're gonna stop at 9, just making sure we actually get to both of those public hearings.
Matt, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that was kind of the approach last time, as we kind of went through the public hearings and with the recognition that we're going to have to come back on all of these. Maybe have a day-long session or something. I don't know. But
That is on Tuesday.
Just a point of process. Matt, are you aware of any restrictions on the number of public hearings we can have? I know for certain issues, there is a limit.
yeah, I don't think there's a limit that I'm aware of. We do have time constraints trying to get through this. And I think the thought was get the public comment and then go into work sessions, after that for discussion. And you can ask people, questions if you have those, but.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so should we move on to Cherry Point then? You ready? Okay. Okay, for the record, my name is Matt Ahmet, representing Planning and Development Services, and going to be talking about Cherry Point this evening. Okay, so Whatcom County designated Cherry Point as an urban growth area under the GMA in 1997, and the Cherry Point boundaries, UGA boundaries, did not change in the last UGA review in 2016. The approximate acreages of the current zoning classifications are heavy impact industrial, which is basically south of Grandview. All of this is 6,565 acres. And then there's light impact industrial north of Grandview here. That's 470 acres. So at the current time, the UGA is just a little bit over 7,000 acres. And this map shows the current boundaries. The Cherry Point employment growth proposal of 1,200 additional jobs over the planning period is consistent with the multi-jurisdictional resolution that the County Council passed in March. And the Cherry Point area has long been utilized and recognized as an important industrial area in the county. In fact, the Cherry Point UGA had 7.1% of the countywide industrial jobs in 2021. And the proposal for employment growth supports opportunities for further growth in the UGA. Okay, so the UGA proposal consists of two things. The UGA boundary isn't going to change. Well, I'm sorry, will change by redesignating parcels north of Grandview Road that have a conservation easement or protective covenant totaling 385 acres from UGA to rural on the Whatcom County Comp Plan map, and then rezone these parcels from light impact industrial or LII to a rural 1 dwelling per 10 acres or R10A. There's no changes to the UGA reserve, and there is no UGA reserve now, so none is proposed. Okay, so this shows the comp plan and zoning map changes. So as mentioned, the existing UGA boundary would be reduced north of Grandview here. They have protective covenants and easements, so that would be taken out of LII and put into R10A. So the industrial land capacity is sufficient to accommodate the proposed job growth allocation over the planning period, and that's why no UGA expansion is proposed to accommodate the projected industrial growth. So that's the presentation. If you have any questions, we try to address those.
Commissioner Dunn.
Yeah, Matt, have you talked with the landowners out there about that change? I know the land is in conservation easement, so shouldn't really be much of a problem there, but are they fine with changing that out of LII?
I haven't personally talked to him. I don't know if our director has or not. We could ask him when he gets back.
Okay, that'd be BP, is that right?
Yep.
Surprised we didn't get a letter from them.
They're the sole landowner, correct?
I believe so.
Commissioner Hanson.
Since that land is undevelopable, isn't there another designation similar to open space? It could be zoned as rather than NA.
Possibly. We have a recreation and open space zone, but it's really more geared towards like parks and things like that. Possibly could be modified. The zone could be modified to accommodate things like this.
Well, I would understand that the owner probably doesn't want people traipsing around on it as per previous discussions about a trail to that area. So I can see a problem there.
Commissioner Bright.
Why was it designated light industrial in the first place? And are there any tax implications to rezoning it?
In the first, this has been an industrial area since 1970 comp plan. And I think over the years, when wetland mitigation became a thing, then they went north and mitigated for projects south of Grandview. So the nature, of the restrictions have changed over time. Yeah, you may be able to, as far as tax implications, you may be able to apply for open space designation. They've done that, for area to the south. Some of those areas are designated as open space tax classification. So that could be a potential.
Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, I just want to put on the record that I own land immediately east of the area proposed for change. The proposed change will have no impact on me, but it is in an area where I have an economic interest.
East of Kickerville or west of Kickerville?
West of Kickerville. If you look at that little, if you look at the little,
this thing?
if you look at the little chunk on the map up there.
Yeah.
So I own probably half that total area.
So you're talking about this area right here?
Yeah. But what you're proposing has no impact on me that I'm aware of anyway. So.
Fun.
Any more questions for Matt? I'll open the public hearing. Vote.
This is for Cherry Point. You wish to speak? All right. Please state your name again for the record.
My name is Ruthie Danielson. I can give you a little history here. The land north of the refinery was purchased by Arco in the mid to late 1980s. There was about 6 farmhouses on there. They were removed. A green belt was established. Less people living close to the refinery, the less potential impact. So they kind of started using money to invest into making that space. In the late 90s and early 2000s, the land was further used as wetlands mitigation, as Matt indicated. As operating areas were adding to that industrial footprint, when new diesel unit, additional wetlands needed to be generated, and that work has been ongoing. So that whole area there is developed wetlands, where they pump water and put trees down. I agree that the current land use zoning of light industrial will never happen based on current use, along with the conservation easements and the protective covenants. But changing it to R10A zoning makes no sense either. It's developed wetlands now, and it is highly unlikely BP would sell the property adjacent to the refinery for single-family homes. I did reach out to them, and she said that, well, they have no public comment at this time. I don't see that the land would ever provide housing as is listed in this thing to accommodate the projected employment growth over the planning period. And then I would ask, is there another zoning category that would make more sense? Why take it from something that it won't be used for and put it into something else that it won't be used for? And they do allow people on the land. They let Fish and Wildlife release pheasants, and there's hunting on either side, south of Terrell, and either side of the river. That's it.
Thank you.
No, sorry.
Anyone else wish to speak? There are no attendees, Chair.
Okay. We'll close the public. Commissioner Brennan.
Matt, I think that the point that's raised by the last speaker is valid because unfortunately what will happen is if it's zoned to anything that's rural, or sorry, anything that has a residential zoning attached to it, then all future land capacity analysis is going to look at that and say, hey, the land's vacant, you can build houses on it. When in fact, the conservation easement that's required in order for them to establish a wetlands mitigation area would automatically prevent housing. So, and that's probably true of other properties around the county as well. There's certainly areas that I know that are zoned for residential that are completely unbuildable because they might be a lake, for example. So I think the point of finding a different land use designation would more accurately reflect what the use of the land is.
So if the majority of the council, or excuse me, the planning commission, would like, we could look at, we did look at the ROS zone. It didn't seem to really fit at this point, but we might be able to tweak some of the text. So it would be, more appropriate for this area. So I guess I would ask the commission, that's something the majority of the commission would like to look at, or?
Commissioner Masseri.
I think I understand everyone's points. I'd like to be able to a chance to review that zoning designation too, just to make sure that would fit, so that we're just not picking another one that might not be right.
Yeah, we'd probably have to do some text amendments, maybe to tweak the language in the ROS zone.
What would it take us to create a conservation zone? That's really what
Probably more work than we have the capacity to do right now. We're just kind of, I'll have a lot based upon the mandatory requirements of the GMA.
I was just glad to hear, I have grandsons and son-in-laws that hunt out there, so I knew all about them. And I was wondering about the R10A. I'm going, man, they hunt out there all the time. And anyway, that answered that question because I knew they did that. So, yeah.
All right.
Was there a motion there, Ron?
We will wait on a motion.
We still have one more public.
We're gonna. Okay. So public hearing is closed.
Do the last.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead and give us the last one.
Okay.
One more.
Right.
The second biggest city in Whatcom.
On areas.
Yep. All right. Again, my name is Matt Ahmet, representing County Planning and Development Services, and we'll be presenting the Rural and Resource Lands proposal. Okay, so the GMA envisions that most future growth will be directed to urban growth areas, or UGAs. This is the current comp plan map. We have a total of 10 urban growth areas in yellow and purple. The majority of the land outside the UGAs are natural resource lands of long-term commercial significance, and that includes over 220,000 acres of forest land, and that's in the darker green, more than 85,000 acres of ag land in the lighter green, agricultural land, and about 5,500 acres of mineral resource land in gray. Additionally, there are about 120,000 acres of rural lands in light brown, dark brown, and orange. So as you can see on this slide, population growth in the rural and resource lands has steadily decreased over the years, and you can kind of see growth by, decade, annual growth, percentage, and then share of countywide growth for the decade. So in the 90s up to 2000, almost 30% of growth was outside UGAs. 2010 to 20, 19% of growth was outside urban growth areas. So the growth proposal of 9,000 additional people in the rural and resource lands over the planning period 2023 through 2045 is consistent with the multi-jurisdictional resolution. This represents growth of about 409 people per year, which is a reduction from past growth. And the current comp plan allocates approximately 84% of projected growth to UGAs and 16% to rural and resource lands. And the current proposal would change that mix a little bit to approximately 87% of growth in urban growth areas and 13% to rural and resource lands. So the proposed housing growth of about 4,400 additional units over the planning period is also consistent with the multi-jurisdictional resolution. And again, this comes from the Housing for All planning tool that the county developed, that the state developed and was modified by the county's consultant. The employment growth proposal of about 3,400 additional jobs over the planning period is also consistent with the multi-jurisdictional resolution passed by council. And it's also consistent with the middle scenario from the consultant's technical report. So the proposal consists of several elements. One would be amending the residential rural 2 dwellings per acre, or RR2, the residential rural 3 dwellings per acre, RR3, and small town commercial zoning text to allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex development when public water is available. And these are zoning districts that would typically exist in a landward, a limited area of more intensive rural development. So Custer Landward, about 90 acres would be rezoned from RR2 to RR3. The Pole and Guide Landward, about 105 acres would be rezoned from RR2 to RR3. And again, this would allow a little more housing. And High Notes Corner at Pole and Hannigan, about 95 acres would be rezoned from RR2 to RR3 and rezone about 71 acres from R2A to RR2. And this is intended to address the HAPT housing needs for the county, some of that more moderate housing that might be less expensive than single family. And then for Lummi Island, the comp plan designation for mineral resource lands, or MRL, would be changed to rural forestry. And then there's a zoning overlay district, MRL special district, that would be removed. And then the underlying rural forestry zoning would be retained for about 25 acres. So the Lummi Island change reflects change in ownership. The Lummi Island Heritage Trust purchased this land in 2015, and the site is now a reserve. Okay, so this slide shows the map changes for Custer Landward. So again, it would rezone about 90 acres from RR2 to RR3. Okay, and then about 105 acres would be rezoned for the Pole and Guide Landward from RR2 again to RR3. Some of these areas probably don't have a whole lot of capacity left, but there is some. And then the High Notes Corner Landward, there'd be rezoning of about 95 acres from RR2 to RR3. And you can see that over here. Here's Hannigan and Pole. And then approximately 71 acres would be rezoned from R2A, and that's 1 dwelling per 2 acres, to RR2, which is 2 dwellings per acre if you have public water. So as mentioned, these rezones are intended to help meet the allocation of the more moderate income housing under House Bill 1220 and the HAPT tool, the Housing for All planning tool. Okay, and then this is the Lummi Island change. Again, the comp plan would be changed to rural forestry from MRL. And then there's an overlay zone, MRL zone that would be deleted, and the underlying RF zone would be retained. And again, that's because of a change in ownership and preserve status of that site now. Okay, so State Department of Commerce guidance indicates that a land capacity is typically required for UGAs, and it's not required for rural and resource lands. However, the county has chosen to do an LCA for housing in rural and resource lands in response to the housing allocations of House Bill 1220 and the HAPT. So the land capacity analysis indicates that the rural and resource lands can accommodate the housing growth projections with zoning amendments previously discussed. There's a little bit of history behind this because when the HAP tool originally came out, we have a consultant, Leland Consultant, that was working with that, and it allocated a lot of lower income and moderate income housing to the county, like outside of urban growth areas. And you know, zoning is very limited outside urban growth areas. And so we had a discussion with the city planner group, and they wanted the county to take, you know, our fair share of these housing forms. But there was also the recognition that rural areas don't accommodate a lot of this housing by nature. You know, we have a lot of R5A, you know, R10A that really doesn't accommodate duplex, triplex, fourplex, multifamily. So we went through a several-month process with the consultant and the city county planner group to try to accommodate some of that housing. And so that's why, you know, we're proposing those rezones in Lammerts is to accommodate some of that housing and not just allow single family, but allow that middle housing, the duplex, triplex, fourplex. So that concludes our presentation. Any questions?
Commissioner Brown.
My first question, actually, no, I'm gonna yield because I've spoken a lot, so who else wants to talk first? You can go, and I'll go after that.
Sure. So looking at these three, I think the Custer one is the one I have the most questions or concerns about. But I guess like from a policy perspective, overall, we're trying to reduce vehicles while travel. We're trying to reduce emissions. How does any upzoning in rural areas help us do that?
Well, there'd need to be some commercial along with it or potentially industrial. Custer does have a commercial zone. But yeah, that's the counterbalance, and that's kind of the struggle with a lot of this. You know, we do have housing allocations that we're supposed to meet. Rural areas have a struggle with that. If we don't allocate some of that housing to Lammerts, then that would go back to the cities, which they were I guess I would say, put it that they wanted the county to take some of this housing and take our fair share. And the housing from the original HAP had a whole bunch of, you know, moderate to low income housing in the county. And we said, we can't really accommodate that. So we started looking for ways. We eliminated Lammerts that were either remote or, you know, in the Lake Whatcom watershed or Lake Samish watershed or Acme, you know, where they have, or Glacier, where they have geohazards. So we can't, you know, we kind of whittled it down to these three that could, you know, potentially accommodate some housing.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like boiled down, the cities were like, take a little so we don't have to take as much more. And even though we all probably agree it's not good planning, at least it reduces the city allocation by a tiny amount. Like that's like the undercurrent. You don't have to respond to that. That's the undercurrent that I'm getting here. I'm surprised because I think a lot of the big cities in Whatcom County, you know, generally are looking to reduce emissions and are doing a good job. So wanting to push this into some of these like Lammerts seems weird to me. Two of the three look like they're already so full that like nothing's realistically really going to happen. So I don't think we're going to meet those housing needs. The only one that seems like it actually has, you know, enough sufficient like open, undeveloped or underdeveloped land is around the spot in Custer, and I would be sad to see that level of development happen in such a rural area.
Yeah, we floated a proposal with the cities that, you know, we have a zero allocation to rural and low income and moderate income, and there was, I guess, some resistance to that, I would say.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, but I'll save that for motions later.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think this is a question for Lauren, actually. Lauren, there's been some public comments about greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled, as Nick mentioned. And the general comment, it seems like the general feeling is you can't expand a UGA or allow people to live in rural areas or grow in that areas unless you prove that you're reducing greenhouse gases and vehicle miles traveled while you're doing that, like specifically with that growth. But the RCW says in that section, quote, a jurisdiction may not restrict population growth or limit population allocation in order to achieve the requirements set forth in the subsection 9D, which is where all this stuff takes place. So could you comment on whether we're allowed to expand UGAs or let people live in rural areas? And if so, are there other ways that we're going to be reducing vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gases in the climate element?
Sure. Hi, this is Lauren Clemens, Climate Action Manager, Whatcom County. I provided a more detailed response for our meeting next Tuesday on September 30th, but I'll say generally, I think we need to look at this on a regional basis. Like transportation planning is pretty locational dependent. So I saw some comments about, multimodal trails in a rural context. The offset to emissions is proportionate to the use of those or the reduction in vehicle trips. So building a sidewalk or a multimodal trail is only going to reduce emissions to the extent that it's used to displace other vehicular travel. And so that's where I think in a rural context, there's other land use principles that are more effective at reducing emissions. There's been some conversation about co-location of housing and employment in a rural context that tends to be more effective at reducing emissions overall. And you cited that provision in the GMA as it relates to 1181 and not restricting population and employment. I don't think that there's been anything that I've seen that prohibits a UGA change specifically due to lack of multimodal infrastructure, but we can talk about that more next Tuesday, and I'll leave it to the jurisdictions as well to adjust their own proposals.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, thank you. Commissioner Hanson.
Sorry, I had to step out for a moment. Did I miss the part about rezoning the rural forestry to commercial forestry?
I mean, it was in our presentation, but we haven't had any discussion.
Okay, you didn't bring
I'm
that
sorry.
up.
I'm sorry. No, that was no. We haven't discussed that.
Okay, so I just want to note that the forest resiliency plan has just come out today. It'll be distributed to council and then maybe be discussed at the next council meeting, and that it strongly supports taking steps to discourage conversion. And so when we get to the point of where we're making motions, I will be prepared to further address that.
Okay. Public hearing? Okay.
Didn't Brad have something?
Yeah, I was waiting. No, I want to yield to this. So I just want to clarify a couple things. I just want to remind everybody. The GMA goals is urban growth, encourage development in urban areas where adequate public facilities and services exist, can be provided in an efficient manner. To your point about urban growth. But then goal 4 is plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments of the population of the state, promote a variety of residential densities and housing types, and encourage preservation of existing housing stock. So rural development, rural residential development is still essential, and there are segments of the population, particularly those who may have some issue with stress or PTSD or so forth, who do require to live in a much quieter environment. So I keep it on the table. Matt, I like the idea of trying to push rural affordable housing into the limits, because I do agree that the more you can get into the density, you're reducing the underlying cost of land per unit of housing. And obviously doing it in the limits, if I understand it, all those lameds have public water, correct?
The three, yes, and that's in the report.
Yeah, Custer has it, Custer has fire flow. I can't remember if the other two have fire flow or not. Do you know that?
Yeah, we'd have to look at their water system plans on that.
So Custer has fire flow, and because I have fire flow, you can build the residences close to each other. So I'd raise the question, if the other two don't have fire flow, you may struggle to get the density you're even talking about. And then the bigger factor is whether the soil will support septic, because there's certainly no sewer out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if the soil is not going to support septic, as much as we may want to have the density out there, you won't get it, because the health department will shut it down.
I know at High Notes Corner, they have done some duplexes out there. But yeah, we haven't done, you know, so
It's very parcel by parcel specific.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so anyway, I'll just throw that out there.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Dunn.
A question about water. There's also some public comments about sort of the scarcity of water. I know our coordinated water plan just came out. Overall, to look at it broad for the county, we have plenty of water and plenty of connections. But when you dial down to very specific areas, there's some places where there's no connections left or there's not enough water anymore. So I've got a list of all the areas that have their Group A community public water systems currently capable of accommodating future growth. And it's a long list, page and a half, single spaced, and things like Custer falls in there, you know, all the cities, Ferndale, Everson, Deer Creek, Columbia Valley, a lot of places fall in there. So when you look at our growth in our rural areas, do you see a lot of water systems that are failing, where people are unable to connect, specifically in the land bridges, or we have plenty of like water and connections there? And then for the places where we don't have water, are those areas we can sort of avoid growth until we can get hookups there?
Yeah. So the landmarks mentioned for rezones, I inserted information from the water system plan, the coordinated water system plan, which was just adopted this week, about their water system capacity, number of available connections. So that's a new feature in the CWSP. So, you know, as far as other areas, the counties, you know, people still have access to exempt wells, and you know, that's allowed under the law. So, you know, I think we probably have to consult with the health department beyond that, but you know, people are allowed to build on exempt wells on R5A or R10A. But there are quite a few countywide. That table totals up how many water connections are available from public water systems. Now, some of those are in remote areas like, you know, Point Roberts or Glacier, where, you know, they're not going to be available to, you know, most people because there's not as much growth out there. But there are a fair number of hookups available countywide, as specified in the CWSP.
Commissioner Brown.
Matt, the only caution I put to that is a Custer Water Association, for example, has both the water rights and the infrastructure to serve the area you're talking about in the Lamet. But a lot of the water associations, they may have the water rights and they may have unused water rights, but they don't have the physical infrastructure. And they can't afford it. And by that I mean they don't have the supply lines straight. So that's the other factor when you come into looking at this. So okay.
A point of order. Since we're past our due date, and I thought we were supposed to have a public hearing, which would be a better reason to continue talking than to hear our opinions.
We need to do a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Go ahead, Harry.
Anyone in the room?
I just was having a thought as I was listening to these more rural development ideas, that I know you mentioned that the ideal would be to have jobs co-located with new housing. I feel like most of the data supports that affordable housing is more effective in places where there are jobs and there are services and there are things already. I worry about kind of infilling affordable housing or below market housing even out into rural areas where that could actually just further depress populations and put people into further hardship. And so I just kind of wanted to put that out there as a thought for the planning commission, because I think most of the data supports that when you have affordable housing, it should be around lots of services, transit, et cetera. I worry about sort of shoving that out to a county space where people are isolated and don't have the resources they need. I bring experience from like living in Vermont, where there's a lot of like rural living, and a lot of it gets really rough because people just don't have easy access to what they need. And you've got to have a car, like you simply have to have a car. And once that expense is placed on someone who's both rural and lower income or really poor, it just becomes a compounding problem. So just sort of food for thought.
Will you give your, say your.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Maya Morales. I'm a charter review commissioner. And I live in Bellingham.
Thanks, Lynn. There are no other persons.
Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, thank you. We'll close the public. Okay,
I did schedule this until around 9:30, if you do want to continue talking. So it doesn't shut off on us.
any other comments? Commissioner Van Dalen.
So are we talking about having more discussion, or are we talking about going for Tuesday's meeting coming up here? That's my question.
So Tuesday's meeting does have the UJ proposals scheduled for that. It'll be chapter.
So we could be discussing
We can
all
wait
that.
for the next meeting.
Make motions then. That's thinking.
Yes.
Make motions on Tuesday.
Yes, yeah, that's, do I need to make a motion that we wait till the Tuesday meeting to do that, or?
No, I don't think you need to do that, but go ahead.
Okay,
I want to make sure that we do have a quorum. I didn't get a response back from everyone if they will be able to make it.
I'm there.
Heck, you should be there. Yeah, I should be there.
Okay, so then we'll have a.
Is that a joint meeting or some?
No, it's just a planning commission meeting. It's a work session.
Sure.
And it'll be here in the annex. Or Zoom.
Well, what time will that be then?
It's from 1 PM to 4 PM.
Yeah, I'm out of town.
But we do have a quorum.
We do have.
All of you.
How about Julie or Sunita?
Yeah, I'm gonna be at the climate conference in LA, so I'll also be out of town.
All right, any other discussion at all? All right, let's adjourn.
Thank you. Bye.
See you, everybody.
And you too, thank you for sitting